What is going on, ladies and gentlemen?
What's up, beautiful
Jonah,
people? How we doing?
I need you to sing that like John Legend, like ordinary people. We're just hard. That's horrible. That's not how it sounds. But I need you to do that.
I don't even know what song you're trying to
You don't know
sing.
that song. I forget you're 16. So you
Remember,
probably
I'm not even a Gen Zer. I'm like a millennial. But just remember that you're like 85 or something. I forget. You got to remember.
more or less. That's probably accurate. Also, I need you guys to know, just for the sake of being clear, I didn't sing that poorly because I can't sing properly. I sang it that way because I didn't want us to get a copyright strike.
Yeah.
why you laugh so quick? Why are you laughing and scoffing at my claims? It's almost as if you don't believe that there's truth. How would you possibly define whether or not there's any truth to what I just said, Jonah?
Well, we would go truthfully. I actually can't tell with that one. In the end, that's going into your inner mind state. But I'm just gonna say
my inner mindset. Okay.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I just don't believe you. I'm gonna throw it out there.
I don't believe you. That's
unlikely. I have no reason to. It's just one of those times where you
That's
just feel like bullshit.
It's a vibe. I feel like a lot of the decisions that we conclude that you come to, or most people come to, it's vibes.
I mean, honestly, it is just most of the time vibes. Most people
I think so.
Vibes.
What's up, everybody? Happy Tuesday. Hope you guys are having a good week, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Another week in the Prophet and Paradox world. The Prophet and Paradox paradigm is actually what's on the prepared palette for today. I'm just going to say how many P words I can say. And I'm excited about it. So for those of you guys who don't know, we talked about this topic a couple times. Last week, 8 million things happened in 1 week. The diddler got arrested. That's what we're calling him, the diddler, because he was out there doing the diddling in devious ways. And so that was a thing. Donald Trump also had another assassination attempt and potentially a third one, which is crazy. So last week, we actually just talked a little bit more about current events. And doing so actually led into a really cool conversation that Jonah and I were able to have. I actually really, really enjoyed last week's podcast.
I have no idea if this is true or not, but like maybe 20 minutes before we went on, I saw a YouTube video that was like, it was something like the second assassination attempt. That guy, they're dropping the charges against him. Don't know if that's true. I just saw that, so I have no clue if it's actually true or not. It was like I saw it and then I had to come on here.
Very, very interesting. Yeah, we're living in interesting times, to be sure. And it seems like every day there's something that's really, really interesting that's happening. Really makes you question what's really going on. And I think that the ability and the need to question what's happening, and what I believe is a skill to be able to do so, is something that I think is not discussed a lot. As a result, that is what we're going to be discussing today on the podcast. Today, we're discussing how do you how do you come to truth? What is truth? So maybe for a second, we'll get a little bit philosophical, but outside of the philosophy of this, tangibly, tactically, how do we come to the conclusions in our everyday lives as to what we believe is true? I think that's going to start with us really asking ourselves, honestly. And guys, I really hope anybody that's watching this thing, you take an opportunity to, if you have a process for this, I would love to hear your process in the comment. Please share what you do in regards to these topics. But I would imagine that a great majority, I don't know, Jonah, maybe 80+% of the people that ever hear this podcast actually don't have a process for this. I don't think they actually put any intentional thought to this. I think they kind of just believe what they're told. They don't put thought into whether or not they're questioning what they're told. And as a result, we have a bunch of people who kind of live their lives just kind of assuming that what they heard was true and never actually wondering if there's any validity to it. And so that's what we want to discuss today, guys. We're going to discuss how do we come to the conclusions that we come to? How do we decide what we want to trust and not trust, what we want to believe and not believe? So Jonah and I are going to go through our respective processes on how we come to those conclusions. Fair warning, I totally dropped the ball. And I went way more philosophical than was the intended plan. So Jonah may be slightly more prepared than me as far as
the conspiracy theory I have is he just doesn't have a process, and he's just And he
But
just
if I
with
didn't
some bullshit anyway.
admitted that, I would have probably not admitted that publicly. I would have just
No, you didn't admit it publicly. What you said was you just dropped the ball.
I dropped the ball. I did.
And
I went way
my
philosophical.
conspiracy theory is you just do vibes.
If you guys want to know what Nietzsche thinks about truth, I got you. But that's not what we're discussing today. We're discussing what Jonah thinks about truth, what Malcolm thinks about truth, and what every single one of us, because the reality is, guys, at the end of the day, we're in a point in our world where we are bombarded with ridiculous pieces of information. We're in a political cycle where we're going to be making decisions that potentially have ramifications on our country. But even on a much more personal level, you guys are deciding whether or not you're going to do business with someone based on your ability to process this skill. You guys are judging relationships that you currently have. How many of us have went through a difficult situation with a friend, with a business partner, or a business situation, and it didn't go well? And a lot of how we react to that situation isn't always the situation itself, but it's how we perceive their intent behind that situation. Oh, you meant to do this. Oh, this is what you said. This is what you meant. This is what you were trying. Right? So we come to a lot of conclusions in our everyday lives, whether it's in personal relationships, business relationships, or even political decisions, that are all driven by how we decide what we believe to be true. If you think about it, guys, this actually has a bigger ramification on every aspect of our lives than we realize. And the craziest part is I don't think any of us actually think about this. We actually don't put any thought into this. You look beautiful, dude. Like,
I know I have to look stupid because this goddamn the sunlight's in my eyes and the blinds are goddamn closed. Hold on, I'm gonna try to figure this out. You keep going. You keep cooking.
Jonah's gonna try to tell us that the blinds are closed, but the sun's still coming into his eyes. Is he telling the truth or not? But that's a summary, guys. Like, that's what we're here to discuss today. We're going to be discussing something that impacts every aspect of our lives every single day. And I would argue that the great majority of us have no process for how we decide what we believe to be true. We have no actual understanding of how we come to those conclusions. We just come to conclusions, usually, as much as we were joking about it, based on feelings, based on vibes, based on assumptions. And I guess the question we would ask ourselves, if we want to live a life that we want to live, is it a viable plan to get to where we want to go by just going off of feelings? Or should we be more intentional about how we come to conclusions, how we think, how we make decisions, and how we judge or process the world around us? I think you should do the land. I think you should be intentional. We're going to discuss how we go through that process, respectively, Jonah and myself. Hopefully, you guys are able to get some takeaways. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the background. We're actually going to start off by giving a little bit of an intro. Jonah's going to take about 5 minutes. Given his process, I'll share the process that I have, and then we're going to chat about it. So, guys, feel free to get involved. Feel free to share your comments. If you are watching this thing, hit the like button. Go share this with friends, family members, aunties, uncles, cousins. Share it with the guy that you get your meat from. That can go a lot of ways. And anyways, I was referring to the grocery store, but if you're in the hip hop industry, I could be talking about anybody. That being said, Jonah, welcome to the podcast, everybody.
With that, we'll keep it moving. Yeah. So, I mean, I could just get into it, guys. Yeah. I mean, I more or less agree with Quijano. I'm going to have like an interesting take, and I'm curious how Quijano's going to feel about it. I think certain things, it is okay to just go off vibes. There are sometimes certain things that just aren't important enough where it's like, look, I can't physically examine literally the truth of every single claim ever made. But certain times I'm just going to go off the vibes because it's so inconsequential to my life, right? There are just certain times because like literally we can't do this process with literally every single piece of information that ever comes to us, or we're going to like just die, right? Like I can't go to the grocery store, look at the due date on the lettuce and truly go through like, do I actually know if this lettuce is good for me? Or like, sorry, not that it's good for me. Like this lettuce isn't going to give me food poisoning, right? There's a certain point where you do have to trust institutions or you won't be able to just get through your life, right? That's probably me and yours biggest differences, but I don't think it's possible to check every single time that Whole Foods is actually putting on the good due date. Sometimes you just have to trust and know like, hey, there are laws where like if you lie about this, you get fucked. but I actually don't know if this specific lettuce is going to screw me or not. But anyways, let's get into it. Let me get into it real quick. So I'll just share you my notes that I've taken. I'm going to just go through a bunch of different claims. So Gianmarco, start the timer, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. We're just going to do 5 minutes each, right? So I'm just going to start with my philosophical first, actually. I'm going to do it without the screen. I'm going to assume, for the sake of this conversation, because I wasn't planning on getting super philosophical, that a truth is real. There is a reality that we actually can know, right? If we start getting into like philosophical, is anything real? Are we just literally in the matrix and we all just have stuff connected to our brains? Then it's like, okay, then like I don't know where the fuck, like if we're living in a simulation, like maybe we're living in a simulation, but for the sake of the argument and what me and Keanu talk about, it has nothing to do with anything that we talk about on this podcast at all, right? None of this matters if we live in a simulation. It's all just bullshit, right? So I'm just going to assume that the world we live in is real, right? And that there is truth. There are true things. There are things that have a right and a wrong answer, right? Abortion. Is it a baby or is it not a baby? There actually is a right answer to that. We'll argue about which one it is, but one of the answers is true, right? These are the philosophical preconceptions I start with generally, just because I can't navigate the world if I start messing with those. We could get into an interesting philosophical debate, but I don't know. I don't think it's possible to navigate the world without these philosophical preconceptions, right? So that's just one. That's like, I'm starting with that baseline. If we argue on that, then it's going to take us down a weird rabbit hole. I don't know. But that's like what I'm starting with philosophically, right? So basically, the overlying premise, more or less, and this is probably hilarious, Malcolm, hilarious. The overlying premise that's all of it comes down to in the end can be summarized into, I generally believe things based on the preponderance. That's not the right word.
Preponderance.
Thank you. The preponderance of evidence. Generally, if a claim has enough evidence for it, I generally tend to believe it. Now, obviously, this isn't fully satisfying, because what the fuck does that mean? And it's hard because it depends on every single situation, right? Me and Kihano are going to put our truth systems through just, is broccoli healthy for you, right? Something that everyone agrees upon later. But more or less, I just ranked the types of evidences that I consider the most reliable to the least reliable. So empirical evidence is the most reliable thing. This is like repeatable experimentation, really high quality studies, and a lot of times double blind studies. And I can get into why I think that's the highest. But in general, this is the highest, mainly because it gets rid of bias, or a lot of bias is taken out of these experimental processes through the scientific method. So this is the best evidence. Then there's statistical evidence. This is kind of like second best. It's basically well-conducted surveys or research with really sound methodologies. And it's through data that's collected, right? This is generally the second best. It can be tampered with more depending on what you do, depending on sample sizes, depending on how you conduct the survey. So it's not quite as reliable as empirical evidence. It's like second best. Depending on what it is, and I might move expert testimony down, because expert testimony, the issue with it is if they have an alternative motive for what they're an expert in and believing what they're an expert in, that can be an issue. But generally, somebody who's an expert on something generally knows more than most people, right? So I take their testimony higher than just a regular human beings. Then it kind of gets into logical reasoning. More or less, is whatever argument you're presenting, is it logical? Does it like make sense? Does it follow, right? Or does it actually not make any sense? Historical evidence, right? Historical evidence can be really tampered with, but still really can be really reliable. past documents, videotapes from the past, whatever. That's like the evidence you use to figure out what's happened in history. This kind of, I should have merged these. I meant really that's the same as documentary evidence, right? Do you remember this one?
All
I
right.
don't know why.
I think you got muted, Jonah, which means that you are out of time. Go ahead and
Wait,
summarize, bro. I
give me
want to
one
hear the
minute.
end of that.
So anyway, so there's a bunch of different
Feel free to
evidences.
summarize, bro, because I'm actually interested in hearing this conclusion. So this, for me, take the time to go through this because I think this is
Well,
important.
I'm just explaining the different types of evidences. I don't need to go into every single one. Anecdotal evidence, people know what that is. Hypothetical evidence, that's like when we're just like kind of using a theoretical scenario to prove something, right? This is just the different levels of the types of evidence. And then what I do is I try to take as much evidence as I can. And if there are competing claims, I'm like, okay, which has more evidence to it out of all of these, right? This is generally how I do it. Then I also look for logical fallacies. So if there's a fallacy in one of the arguments, let's say, I don't know, like I'm trying to think of like a good one, right? And like a past one. I can think of an example, but there are many different logical fallacies, red herrings. I don't know. There's a lot of different ones. I always look for those as well. This was something else I wanted to mention because we keep running into this. Because I remember us talking about proving negatives. So I wasn't really able to verbalize very well why you can't prove a negative to you. Here's basically why generally like the responsibility of proof is on the person making the positive claim, right? And here's like, so like in most logical and legal contexts, the person making claim or assertion has the responsibility to provide evidence for that claim. This is because it's not feasible or practical for others to disprove every conceivable possibility, right? So for instance, let's say, Kihano, you want me to prove that unicorns do not exist, right? It's actually basically impossible to prove that unicorns do not exist because you can come up with a scenario where it's like, well, Jonah, you haven't checked every single forest to see if unicorns exist, correct? I'm like, well, technically, no. It's like, well, that you can't prove they don't exist. And it's like, okay, then like, I can't know whether anything's true then, right? So, because there's always a possibility I haven't checked every single thing for it not existing. Now, proving the claim unicorns exist, that is why the burden of proof is on the fact that unicorns exist, because okay, to prove that it actually unicorns exist, now there's evidence you can actually get to prove that. Well, it's actually kind of impossible to prove that unicorns don't exist. It is possible to prove that unicorns exist because there's actually positive evidence you can do for that, right? So that's kind of like where that went into. I kind of wanted to explain that because of that. Here's generally my process. I try to follow this. So here's like the actual process, and I'll end it with this. I just want to go through this really, really quick. Define the claim or question. So just like make sure you understand what the claim is. Now, obviously, I fuck it up when we're doing like a political debate. I'm like kind of getting heated, whatever. I don't always do this perfectly, right? I try to gather initial evidence. So the initial evidence is going to obviously be completely different depending on the claim. So for one, let's say broccoli is healthy, right? Okay. The first thing I'm going to do for something like that is try to find peer-reviewed studies. If I'm really interested in it, this is going to be the most important thing, right? As much as I possibly can. I think that's the highest amount of evidence that we can get, right? Is how many studies I can find. Expert reviews help also. And then the third would be like testimonials or something like that, right? If political, it just has to be, because you don't do peer-reviewed studies with something that's political, you're probably just going to have to gather like news stories, right? As much as you can, or as much like evidence or video evidence or whatever you can in order to figure out like at least the facts, right? Then you got to evaluate the evidence, right? So the source credibility, right? If I'm getting something from Fox News, I know it's leaning towards the right. So I'm going to know that whatever they're saying is happening is right biased. If I get something from MSNBC, I know it's going to be left biased, right? probably if I get something from CNN or PBS or any of them, I consider it that they're going to be moderately left biased, right? And generally, there are like a bunch of like, studies that have been done to show like where they're leaning on most issues. And so I try to take that into consideration. If I can, I check the methodology of the studies. I do everything I can to evaluate it. And then I check for logical consistency. Basically, like one example is if we're talking about a supplement, are they just using anecdotal evidence? That's not great evidence to suggest that it will work for everyone because it's anecdotal, right? It could be different if you have only like a couple of examples over across a huge population. And yeah, and then you can use things like deductive reasoning, right? So basically, if their ingredients is 40 grams of sugar, I already know based on past research I've done that that's not healthy for you, right? So you can use deductive reasoning too. Try to consider alternative explanations. We'll go into that. I know I'm going really long here. So if I really don't get it, I'll try to talk to an expert if I still don't really understand, right? Depending on what it is, if I need historical and contextual information, this could be something like, if it's more a historical thing, but sticking to the diet supplements, like generally what has this particular supplement? Is it related to any other supplements that have been studied on? Stuff like that. If I can, I will test the claim. This is really hard to do. I almost never can do this with something like that. Like I can take the supplement and try it out, right? But that could be good or bad. Synthesize the findings, basically just synthesize everything we're just talking about. And then if I need to present it, communicate it, right? So that's more or less the process, right? That I try to go through if I'm really like going super in depth on the truth of a particular claim, right? That would be like if I really, really, really want to know whether it's true or not. Like that's what I did with my research on Trump trying to steal the 2020 election, right? I went through as much of that process as I possibly could. So it depends. I don't do this with every claim because that process takes fucking forever, right? So yeah, anywho, that's it.
So
I love it. CNN is
what
moderately left.
what percentage of the time, honestly speaking, would
Do
you
I
say you
use
go
that?
through that? Yeah.
Honestly, probably like 1 to 5%.
Okay. Then I guess my question would be is you put together a very, very, very thorough outline that you believe is a reliable
To fully
method.
go through that process.
Sure. So you believe that's a reliable method to understand whether or not what you're believing is true or not,
Mhm.
yet you never do it. Then I guess I would argue is what's the point of knowing the right way to do something if you never actually do it that way because it's too much like work.
So it's like, here's a metaphor I could use for it, right? What would be like a good metaphor for this? I know how to cook eggs, right? Sometimes I just don't have the time to crack the egg open, put it in a pan, and fry it. So sometimes I microwave the eggs. It's not as good. It's not
Wait,
as
you
this is a
microwave?
bad. I don't actually microwave eggs. Hold on, I don't actually microwave eggs. I don't actually microwave eggs. I'm trying to use this as an example to prove a point. I don't microwave eggs. Okay,
I
might be a
don't know.
terrible example.
I feel like
I don't have
think
a
what
good
you're saying
example
is
for
true. I
this.
think you actually microwave. But
I
Jonah's
am
out
not
here eating
actually
microwave.
microwaving eggs. Fuck you. Fuck you. Okay? Shut up. I'm trying to come up with an example here. That's a bad example. I can think of a better example.
Sure
There's a way where you do something super detailed, super thorough, where you really know whether it's true based off of that. And then there are ways to shortcut it when you just don't have enough time in the day, right? So I
Okay.
do that with really important claims, things that I think are contentious, right? Here's what I've honestly done. So theoretically later, we're going to do the broccoli thing, right? I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't do this with broccoli, right? I'll tell you what I did with broccoli, right? So
Okay.
the first thing was exactly like you said. My parents told me that broccoli was good for me. That's where I first learned this truth. That was the first place I learned. It was always on the dinner table, yada yada, right?
Okay.
Then throughout my years in school, I took different nutrition classes and just learned about vitamins and nutrients and which ones that broccoli has, and it has those, right?
Right.
And then from there, nothing's ever entered my world to tell me that broccoli is unhealthy, right? Keanu just left. He just casually just left the screen, dude. We're in the middle of a
What
podcast,
happened
bro.
was I had to blow my nose, so I went off camera.
Okay.
I also microwaved some eggs. So if you're hungry, Jonah, I got you.
No,
Yeah.
it's all good. God damn it. So for instance, for the broccoli thing, so far my entire personal experience with broccoli is that it is healthy for me, and it's never been unhealthy for me because I've never explored it. So the first one was just my parents told me it was true. It was true. Then I took different nutrition classes that used broccoli as an example, saying that it's healthy, and here's the reasons why it has vitamin A, vitamin B, whatever, right? And then 3, no one has even contested that it isn't healthy, right? So a lot of things, if nobody contests it, I don't take the time to research it because I can't do this with every goddamn thing. I can't spend hours researching whether broccoli's healthy or not, right? I do this process with things that are contentious, generally, right? So for instance, political things, I do this a lot with, like abortion, right? It's like, okay, at what point does this thing become a baby, right? How does Jonah think about this? Okay, what is a baby in essence, right? Like we have to describe its parts, right? Has a heart, can think, right? Somewhat, has some brain activity, right? To some extent, has body parts. We can come up with a bunch of different things. Has some bone structure, right? Something like that. So this is a general concept of a baby, and I'm just doing like a very basic one right now. We could get into it like more. I'm like, okay, I know scientifically at the moment of conception, it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have body parts at that moment, right? So that, at least intuitively, doesn't feel right. Now, some Democrats are like, you can kill it right before it's about to come out of the vagina. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. What the fuck? Right? Like it is like fully developed. It's about to be a baby in like 5 seconds. Like there's nothing like intrinsically different between those two. So then we have to go with like, okay, what do we believe even makes a baby, and when do these things happen? And then try to find a point where it makes sense. That's like how I came up with the abortion one, for instance. It's like I use scientific data of like when certain things develop. And then I also used philosophical reasoning, logical reasoning, which I was talking about earlier, of like, okay, what makes a baby? This thing that what are we valuing here, right? I'm not going to value a cell because cells come off our body, like skin cells. We're constantly shedding skin cells, right? Skin cells are dying off of us constantly. We're not tripping about it, right? What do I value here in the life of a baby? Like, when does it become actually a baby? When does that actually become valuable, right? And so that one, for instance, is a kind of a mix of logical reasoning and a mix of scientific evidence, right? Science kind of informs you, but it doesn't have a definitive answer on that one. So I think about it more when it's something that's contentious. When it's something that's not contentious, I almost never go through this. And 96% of things in our life, I think, aren't contentious. Like generally, even like, believe it or not, I think liberals and conservatives agree on generally life things. They generally agree there are things called buses and they take you places. They generally agree there are cars, right? Most of their realities are exactly the same. it's when we get onto these edge things that do affect us a lot that we need to apply this process. So did that make sense? Did that answer the question?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So for those of you guys who are just jumping in, what we're talking about is kind of what is truth? How do we come to the conclusions that we come to? How do we make the decisions that we make and feel comfortable doing so? And kind of the little intro that I gave kind of begs the question, how many of us actually even put thought into it? Most of us just kind of believe what we believe, right? Why? Because it's what we were always exposed to, or what we feel makes sense to us. But the question is, if every aspect of our lives and the decisions that we make in our lives are driven by the way we come to conclusions, is there validity? Is there logic behind us maybe being intentional about this and actually coming to the conclusions intentionally? So what Jonah just did is he gave a breakdown of how he believes this should be done, the process that he goes through to make the decisions, to vet what is right and wrong, what is true and false. But here's what's interesting. So what we did at the beginning, guys, is he gave his intro. I'm going to give mine here in a minute, and we're going to chat about it. Here's what's interesting, bro.
Fucking idiot in his intro.
All right.
This is all you're going to do. You're going to be like, now, like, here's the thing that's interesting.
Here's the
interesting
actually
really stupid. I'm going to use my 5 minutes in order to do that. I'm just kidding.
Here's the thing, guys. Here's what's interesting to me. A couple of things. I'll give my synopsis, and I'm going to take a much simpler approach from my perspective. First and foremost, here's what's interesting. Jonah just gave this full, really thorough, understandable breakdown as to why or how you can go through processing what is and is not true, air quotes. The problem is then Jonah admitted he doesn't even follow that process the great majority of the time because it's a lot of freaking work. While you were showing me your process, I'm looking at this. And you know what's going through my head, bro? I'm like, if this was the way that we had to process information, if this was the appropriate way to do it, I understand why nobody does it. Because that's a lot of work. And most people aren't going to do that. You yourself, who espoused this methodology, don't want to do it.
Depending. I'll do it with something.
Unless it's important. For exactly. So here's my response. Here's my answer. Here's what I do. And I think this is my, I guess to a degree, maybe a little bit of a response to what you just said. I take a drastically different approach to a large degree.
I just watch TikTok.
And then if it's on TikTok, it's obviously accurate. I share it to Jonah. He tells me I'm an idiot. And here, honestly, guys, here's a vetting process. If Jonah called me an idiot, I know that what I sent him is true.
It's true. Gotcha.
That's it, right? If you think it's dumb, it must be accurate. So
I took 20 minutes. Whoops, Gianmarco. Sorry.
So here's really where this comes down to, guys. First and foremost, Jonah, I don't think you gave us a process for truth. You gave us a process for facts.
Okay.
And I don't think that's the same thing. I don't think that facts are truth. I don't think that truth and facts are the same thing. I think they're two different things, but I do think that they're related. I think that truth is the fundamental core foundation on which facts should stand. However, if we just use your methodology as an example, I see nothing but holes in that. Why? Because first and foremost, if I could present to you multiple court cases where people were wrongfully imprisoned for decades because the facts stated they were guilty. And then later, new facts were presented that demonstrated that the previous facts were not facts after all. Well, this creates an interesting conundrum for the support and blind faith that we place in facts. Facts are fallible. Facts can be wrong. Facts can be disproven. Truth can't. And I think that it's naive for us as a people to put blind faith in facts alone, because by definition, facts can change, because all facts is a conclusion based on currently available evidence, which can change based on the advancement of any given thing. So by definition, I do think it is important to differentiate between truth and facts. Now, that creates an interesting set of questions. to which I'll give my process on how I determine what I'm going to accept as potential truth or fact in my life and what I'm not. And I take a much simpler approach, and I'll tell you why. One, because people usually respond to what the path of least resistance is in our lives. If something's complicated, we won't do it. Case in point, anybody who's not in shape, right? We all want to be. I don't know many people who want to be obese or out of shape or have flappy little arms. Everybody wants a six pack for the most part. Not everybody, but you get my point. But it's the process. So if you make the process too complicated, correct. Must be on TikTok, then it's a fact.
It's just so funny. If the audience was in it was in the WhatsApp chat, you guys would know what we're talking about here, because it's just like 6 TikToks of the world government, and I'm like, okay,
here's the thing: you could legitimately provide exact video evidence of a thing happening that contradicts Jonah's worldview, and he'll be like, "Yeah, but what's your source? How do I know that this camera's battery wasn't dead at the time, and as a result, distorted the image? Was there a peer-reviewed process on that?"
Well, to your point, what if?
What if? That's a fair question, man. So here's my process, bro. And I'll simplify it. I make it simple, because if it's too complicated, we won't do it. I think that my process to how we filter the information that comes through, what we trust, what we don't trust, what we believe, what we don't believe, I think it's simpler, but it's also harder. Why? It's simpler in process, but it's more difficult because emotionally it requires us to check our emotions, right? And that is where the difference comes into play. So it's harder, even though it's more simple. So the first thing that I do is I keep it really simple. I tend to take the stance that I question everything. That's it. Somebody tells me a piece of information, I don't automatically assume that it's wrong. I think that's naive, and it's extremely time consuming. It's exhausting. But I simultaneously don't think that it's ultimately accurate either. I think that there has to be a perspective that you keep in your back pocket that says, all right, I'm going to question everything. You tell me some piece of information that's true, that's interesting. But let's see. Now, the next question is, all right, well, is the juice worth the squeeze? How much effort do we put into doing this before we realize that we're just spinning our wheels and we're spending too much time? I think to that question, you have to ask yourself, what's worth understanding? There are some pieces of information you just don't care about. I'll give you an example for me. For many years, flat Earth, right? The amount of people who brought me the whole flat Earth thing. And my response for a long time was like, that's cool. It's interesting. Absolutely. I just don't care. I just don't care. Like, it just was never something that moved the needle in importance in my life, because the question that I always asked was, while the information that you're now, here's the thing. I didn't automatically assume it was true because thousands of people had thousands of pieces of evidence to support their claim. I also didn't automatically believe it was false because my 3rd grade teacher told me that the earth is round. I didn't believe that either was accurate. My response in my head was, I don't know. I'm a default to what I kind of always have believed. So I'm a probably lean to earth is round, bro, because I don't really have any reason to put any more thought into this. And I think that that's okay. I think sometimes with some pieces of information, it's okay. It's a square. Boom. That's it. Right? What's the line? I drove by the fork in the road and went straight. That's it. I chose my own path.
You just said fuck all you square. You turn it back on you. It's a rhombus.
It's a parallelogram, bro.
Sorry.
So yeah, for me, I think there's a place, Jonah. I think to your point, there's a place where it can get exhausting to just constantly like delve into every possibility. There's a point where it's just not the juice isn't necessarily worth the squeeze. But I think that even in that process, what's important for me is I have the foundational habit of I'm questioning everything. I'm not assuming either is right. And until I need to take a position on something, I'm okay not taking a position at all. But I'm not going to default necessarily to any position just because it's a popular one, because I think that that's naive. I think that that is an exercise of not thinking for yourself. I think that's important. I think thinking for yourself is an exercise. I think your brain is a muscle. I think the act of constantly challenging thoughts, ideas, and information flexes the muscle of our brain. And I think that as a society, at the very least in Western culture, but I would say as society overall, most likely, not only is it not encouraged to challenge ideas, it is discouraged and mocked to challenge ideas, which is interesting to me because by definition, the brain is a muscle, which means it needs to be exercised. And part of exercising that muscle will require you challenging pre-existing beliefs. Would you agree or disagree with that?
Say it one more time. Sorry.
I said basically the summary is if the brain is a muscle, part of flexing that muscle should include the challenging of pre-existing beliefs.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a good exercise for your brain. Now, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily disprove the whole world and all of a sudden, now to people in the comments, we're living in this simulation. It doesn't mean you have to come to those conclusions. You can challenge ideas and still come to the original conclusion. But I think there's strength in challenging the idea. But here's the other part of that. The other side of that coin is I think there's danger in not challenging ideas. I think there's danger in that. Why? Because you never develop the muscle of discernment. You never develop the muscle of independent thought. What do you develop in return? You develop a habit of complacency. You kind of just do what you're told. You just trust whatever's given to you. You're kind of, and I hate to use this term because it's got a connotation to it, but you're kind of a sheep. You're just like running around, just doing whatever you're told, not really thinking for yourself. And here's the thing. You give me that whole scientific process, I would argue, who says it's a good idea just to trust it because science said it? I think that's naive. I think it is naive to blindly trust something because science said it's true. Why? Well, the scientific process tells me to do that. Because by definition, the scientific process says that they're going to postulate ideas. They're going to come to conclusions. But those conclusions could very well be challenged and found to be false later on down the road. Right? We know this to be true historically. Correct, Jonah? Well, who would be the person or people that would challenge that truth or that fact to be found to be no longer factual? Somebody who is willing to challenge something that everybody else accepted. But even though everybody accepted it, and even though it was a foregone conclusion for many, and even though some might mock those people for even endeavoring to go and challenge a pre-existing idea, the person was bold enough and brave enough to challenge convention, think for themselves, and in the process, sometimes amazing things happen. Sometimes you discover things that nobody else would discover. Right. So this, for me, Jonah, is why the process that I kind of lean to is so important. Questioning everything isn't a conspiratorial ideology. It's just an exercise of the human brain. I would argue it's actually an important part of the human experience to be able to question what's told to me, because everything great that's happened on our planet throughout history happened because someone was willing to challenge conventional thinking. Everything. Nothing great happened by just accepting what everybody thought to be true. Everything great came from people who were willing to challenge. Yet and still, we live in a society where people boast at the position of mocking people who challenge conventional thinking. We actually rally around each other as a society and poke fun at people, and we give them names like conspiracy theorists or crazy people or weirdos or all of these names that we give people because they were bold enough to go out there and challenge what everybody else accepted to be real. So what's the saying, right? An idea is usually thought to be crazy until it's proven right. Right? Whether a person is crazy or they're a genius is usually on the result of the thing that they endeavor to try. And there's a lot of, right? The world is changed by people who are crazy enough to believe that they can. I could give you a bunch of different adages that all point to the same thing. It is not only healthy, but I believe it is a responsibility of human beings to say, I don't care what you and everybody else in the class is saying. I actually think a little bit differently. And I am going to give myself the courage to be able to say, you know what, as much as everybody thinks it, I'm still going to challenge that thought. I'm going to go out and I'm going to think for myself. I'm going to challenge the perspective and I'm going to do some research. I'm going to do some extra homework and see if I come to a different conclusion. Right? Now that comes with some boundaries as well, because you can go off the deep end and have absolutely nothing whatsoever after decades and decades to support your claim. And then you have to ask yourself, okay, what's driving this? Does that necessarily mean you're wrong? No. Right? Again, you can pursue something for 20 years, not see the results, and still be right. Nikola Tesla is a fantastic example of a lot of these things, right? Nikola Tesla, for all intents and purposes, by many measures, died as a failure. And it's generations later that we're finally realizing that he was overwhelmingly correct. So again, what's our measure? If your measure is other people's limited thinking, your measure is wrong. This is the difference between fact and truth. I think truth is bigger. Truth is eternal. Facts are temporal. And I think that the way we find the bridge between that two is having the self-confidence to say, I know what everybody else believes, but I'm going to challenge it anyways. And I'm going to follow my own set of processes to be able to find out whether or not this is true. So as a quick snapshot, what are some of those processes? One, I think a lot of it comes down to discernment. Another one is deductive reasoning. Discernment is a muscle as well. Deductive reasoning is also a muscle. There's a reason that people who come from different backgrounds have a little bit more discernment than others, because discernment is something you don't have to develop unless you exercise it, right? So I think those things are important. I think all of the methods that you put out there, Jonah, are important. I don't think those are the end all be all. I don't think those are clear fail safes. I think those are processes you can follow, but I don't think I would say because it passed this test, it's good. It's peer reviewed, so it must be right. False. I don't look at it that way. I say I'm going to pass it through a series of tests, and it's going to continue to grow in strength, or it's going to start diminishing in strength, right? But I think that it all starts, what your process is once you've decided to challenge the idea, that's step two. But I think the most important thing is at the very beginning, as a human being, we got to challenge. I think you got to question things. You got to question everything. You got to be willing to develop the muscle to be comfortable questioning things. Doesn't mean you got to pursue everything you question. But when you question it, I think it creates a perspective of the world where you're less likely to take a headline from the news media, to take a thing that's sent to you on TikToks, right? Because you laugh a lot and you refer to me as like some right-wing type of guy, right? Which is cool. What's funny is that you don't see me in the other chants with my more right-wing friends who send me stuff that I critique just as much as I critique the left-wing stuff. Because anything that's in an extreme should be critiqued. I question genuinely everything. So for me, that is the biggest muscle. All of those steps that you put in there, I think those are great. But I think if we just started with the simple foundation of question things, just start questioning things. Make it a habit to question things. Somebody presents to you an information. Wait, whoa, before I get all emotional, start defending it. Why do I believe that? Oh, before I'm starting to jump in this thing and I'm resharing, why do I believe that? Let me question it and at least know why I believe what I believe. If I can't answer the question why I believe what I believe, I don't even have my own beliefs. I'm just parroting somebody else's, and I don't even realize it. That for me is where I would start with that.
Okay, cool. Can I ask you some questions about that?
Of course, dude.
So, question everything. What do you do after that? So let's say, I don't know, let's do evolution, right? We won't get
Okay.
into a debate about evolution,
Sure.
right? But like, okay, you're told evolution is true. You've seen like the same things that I presented in our debate, whatever. You're like, okay, let's see if this isn't true. I'm going to question this. What do you do then? Like, what's the next step? Because obviously, if you only question everything, then you just don't know anything. Then
So
you're just not
this is my process, right? We've discussed this beforehand. I came to these conclusions, right? So this step 2 is based on experience, personal experience. A lot of you guys know I was in ministry for a long time. I went through this phase where I was really challenging my beliefs with that and putting them to the test. I was doing research. First thing I found was that I found myself leaning towards information that supported my pre-existing ideas and scoffing at anything that challenged them. I realized I was creating my own echo chamber, and that wasn't good. So I changed my process after, I don't know, probably a couple months. I was like, let me just change this up. How do I do this? Well, I can't. I'm going to continue to lie to myself. If I keep saying, no, I'm being open-minded, I'm not. So what I started to do was, if I came into the situation wanting to find truth and I knew I had a pre-existing perspective, I actually went to find evidence for the contrary. So when you and I did our debates, it had been a long time since I had ever discussed anything as it relates to evolution. So you know what I did? The first thing I did, was I went and researched arguments for evolution. That's the first thing I did. The very first thing I did for our podcast is I researched arguments for evolution. And I tried to see if I could find validity in the arguments. And I actually found some really interesting consistencies that I was not comfortable with. And then I followed that thread. And that thread led me to the information because I was like, well, these seem like a bunch of what I found was straw man arguments. They would present this idea that sounded strong, and then they would like skip the part that they didn't have an answer for. And I'm like, that's really interesting. Why'd you skip that? Okay, go to the next video. Okay, they skipped over that too. That's interesting. Why does everybody keep skipping over this? One of them was the fossil record. I noticed everybody got a little weird. And you know when somebody's talking to you, if they kind of skim over a subject, you're like, that's interesting. Why'd they do that? I noticed that with the evolution debate. I'm like, this must be a huge issue. So I went and I researched it, and I found that it is a huge issue. This is why. So that's the approach that I go. I actually go and I start with information against my claim, and I don't listen with the intent to disprove. I listen with the intent to understand. Because if I can find myself like clearly understanding their perspective and not finding holes in it, I can actually maybe save myself a lot of time and realize, hold on, I'm over here like dismissing this point of view, and but I've never actually listened to it. I think most of us do this. We dismiss points of views we've never actually listened to because we're 5-year-olds. We're emotional little children, and we can't listen to perspectives that differ than ours without getting all freaking weird about it. And so I was just like, let me just get over that. Now, that's why I say my process is hard. It's simpler, but it's hard. This part right here is one of the places where it's hard. Because when I neutrally come into this and say, let me just see if they can change my mind. Let me just see if they can say something that really makes me say, wow, that's a good point. Now I understand your perspective. Now I successfully put myself in your shoes, and it changes the way I research. That, for me, is the responsible way to do it.
Okay. That's all. That makes sense to me. So you want to just do a claim? I think the broccoli one's going to be super boring the more I think about it. Do you want to do the broccoli? I feel like it's
broccoli works for me. Boring. I like it. Broccoli's good.
Okay. All right. Guys, we might consider this boring. I'm not sure of how interesting this is going to be to you guys. We're going to try to figure out whether broccoli is actually good for you or not.
So what we're doing is we're using each of our respective processes to challenge an idea to see if it changes our perspective on something. Should I start? Yeah, go ahead. You went first. Go ahead. Go first.
Okay, so we'll share my screen. So like, here's like what I would do. That's a pretty scientific claim, right? This is something that theoretically I should be able to find peer-reviewed research or some sort of experimentation to show that broccoli is healthy, right? So obviously I'm starting with the internet. So I'm going to do something like, I don't know, studies proving broccoli is healthy for you, right? So we'll start here, right? I would just start looking at this, right? Now, this is going to, if I was to do my full thing, which I don't know if we really want to do right now, I would read this study, right? And what it has to say. For the sake of it not being so goddamn boring, and this is what I do if I really need to just get through shit, I'm not as interested, I'm going to read the abstract and the conclusion. This is like a little lesson in studies, right? You can get most of what you need just from the abstract and conclusion. So, okay, so broccoli has recently gained considerable attention due to its remarkable nutritional composition and numerous health benefits. This review, the nutritional aspects of broccoli are examined, highlighting its rich nutrient content and essential blah, 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 blah. It's a rich source of all this shit. It also has been shown to contain blah, 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 all these health-promoting effects, right? These chemicals are known to have potential antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, and anti-cancer effects. Great. This review article aims to comprehensively examine the diverse spectrum of nutrients contained in broccoli and explores medicinal potential to promote human health, right? So I don't know how much of this we want to read. I would, if I was like truly trying to read whether broccoli is, I would like read all of this. I think for the sake of the podcast, I shouldn't do that. That's just going to take forever and be super boring. So I'm going to look here and I'm going to be like, okay, interesting. So how do they come to the conclusion that it includes vitamin C, K, and A, right? You go to 11 right here. see if I can find this. I think a Google Scholar is going to be the best one for that. Okay, that's weird. That's tomatoes. So I don't know why. I don't know why it just took me there. A little weird there. So I'm like, okay, why the fuck are you taking me to tomatoes? And we're trying to find out whether broccoli is good, right? This one is just saying that dietary fiber is good for you. Aren't these things supposed to be telling me that like broccoli is, hold on. I'm not sure what they're referencing here at this point. Like, I am kind of curious, how do they find out that broccoli has these things in them? Broccoli is often considered a nutrition because it contains blah, 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 blah. Like, this seems to be more of a study that's just saying it has these things in it, and that's why it's healthy.
I feel like at this point, 80%, 90% of people are like, I'm just going to get the broccoli.
The effect of broccoli. So, like, it's just interesting. It's like, what the fuck? So then, like, okay, theoretically, it has all these things in it. Now I'm, like, kind of curious. How do we know what's inside? What's nutritionally inside of broccoli? Just because those took me to some weird fucking places. Okay. So theoretically, this is the AI overview, but like, I don't know if I have. Are they going to say it, or is it just going to be the AI? Is the AI really going to just be how I have to figure this out? Like, how do you analyze it? How do you analyze broccoli? This is taking.
I am now seeing why you never actually do the research that you see.
Because it's like, dude, like I'm gonna have to like okay. Consumers evaluate the appearance. Shut up. Aroma and flavor, volatile markers.
Believe in yourself. It has a valid strategy.
Characterization, absorption, brands. What the fuck, dude? Why aren't these people saying how they know what broccoli is or what's in broccoli? Why are we not like able
Maybe they're hiding it from you.
Like, are they? Like, why am I like being an idiot? Like, what the fuck? Why aren't they telling me how they figure out what's inside of a vegetable? All right, let's just do that. How do we know the nutritional value of food? Let's just go there. Let's start basics. Okay, let's see if the USDA Human Resources has some shit with me. To-do can usually be found in use blah blah blah. Follow the steps below. Okay, that's great. How about you tell me how you found it out? All right, what the fuck? Why is this so hard?
I'm loving that you're finally broccoli is what is going to expose you to the conspiratorial world.
Oh my god, dude. What is this? Is anyone gonna tell me how they come up with broccoli? Like, all I got so far is an AI is they analyze tissue. Like, okay, how the fuck, dude? Okay.
Okay. You want to jump into mine?
I'm gonna look up Pura. What?
You want to go to mine?
Sure. Well, basically, I'll tell you just what I would be doing.
No, finish.
Well, no, like, it's gonna take too long. And it's gonna be super boring, right? What I would keep doing is I would just keep looking and be like, okay, how did you analyze broccoli? And I'm gonna find out. There's someone knows somewhere on Google how one analyzes broccoli. And I would keep looking for that because that's a little weird that like they're not really leading me to the places.
So this is interesting. Let's give this a shot. Tell me if you're cool with this, right? We did not plan this. But what we're doing is we're comparing our processes to see how we process information in the world. We're comparing our processes. How about we grade our processes? We'll use these simple examples to grade your process. 1 to 10, we'll grade your process, and then we'll grade my process, and just see if we think one is more efficient or one brings us to more or better information than the other. You cool with that?
Sure.
How would
I
you
would
rate your process based on how it played out with broccoli on a 1 to 10?
Look, I would say that it's probably a 6 right now because what the fuck was that? Why aren't you people telling me how you
Broccoli is
find
out to
what
get you, dog.
broccoli? Like why
Guys,
why
on a
was that
1
like
to
a
10, what
fucking
would you
study?
rate Jonah's process for as it relates to his broccoli discovery? Yvonne gave you a 3. That's harsh. I would have give you a 5. Mine is I'm giving you a 5. I'm giving you a 5. That's what I'm doing. Interesting. Okay, let's do mine. So, are you down? Are you down for me to go my direction?
Sure, go for it.
So, here is what I would do. So, my question to your answer beforehand, I said that if I'm coming into the situation with a preconceived idea, I'm going to challenge my preconceived idea. Why? Question everything, including yourself. Perfect. Well, what do I do when I don't have a preconceived idea? What I will usually do is challenge the current narrative. I will research all sides of it. Oftentimes, I will start with the opposite side. So, what's the general conclusion about broccoli? That it's good for you. Is this that it's healthy, right? So, what am I going to do? I'm just going to look up, why is broccoli bad for you? That's literally what I'm going to look up. Why? Because everybody else is already telling me one thing. Right? What does Mark Twain say? Mark Twain said, when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to seriously reconsider your position. So if my foundation is challenge everything, question everything, then if you're telling me broccoli is good for me, well, then what do I already know by basic deductive reasoning, which I think I said is an important part of this process? Well, I already know that the masses have already done all of the work for that claim. That information's already out there in spades. Right? And everybody's going to continue to parrot that. So researching that will probably not yield me much fruit or vegetables because it's already the popular narrative. So I'm going to go the different direction, right? So I will go, why is broccoli
Share your screen.
bad for you? That's what I'm going to do. Why is broccoli bad for you? Now, the cool thing in situations like this, if you're using Google, you can see what other people have searched. So now this search automatically starts telling me that there is at least a decent amount of information out there that says that people have had this problem. Why? Because Google is populating, unless they've intentionally suppressed it, which they have been found guilty of doing. But I'm sure they're not doing it against broccoli. So I know that these are popular search terms. Multiple people, potentially millions of people, have come out here and searched these things, which means that there is a likelihood that there is a general consensus out there, even though it's not the popular one, that broccoli might be bad for your thyroid, might be bad for your stomach, might be bad for your heart. We know this, and at least we know there's a likelihood of this. But before I get there, I'll do this. Okay. However, like most vegetables is in the cruciferous family, blah, 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 blah. This is high FODMAP. Are you familiar with high FODMAP?
No.
Unfortunately, I am, because of my immense digestive issues over the years. FODMAP is basically people who have dietary reactions to things are told to go on a low FODMAP diet. And if they go on a low FODMAP diet, they are able to find that maybe they've reduced their reactions to things. You go on elimination diets, all these different things. There are people who have lived their entire life with huge problems that doctors could not solve. This goes back to talking about the medical industry. And then what happens is the doctors don't know the answer to this 8 out of 10 times. But if you go on a low FODMAP diet, you can resolve issues that doctors haven't been able to solve forever, right? So this is just one of the things. Oh, look at this. Broccoli is bad for you. Like, really toxic, bad. thinkingnutrition.com.au. So I'm assuming that's Australia. Shout out to Malcolm. Your people don't like broccoli. Broccoli makes pesticides that kill bacteria and fungi and insects, toxic to farm animals. So there's a whole situation here, right? And then basically, this is what I'm doing. So at a glance, bro, with seconds, because I was willing to research the opposite of the narrative, would you agree or disagree that I already came up with more compelling information than you did trying to find evidence to support your claim?
So I fucked up by not finding the methodology. So I screwed up. I should have controlled F and gone to their methodology, which I kind of just did, right? Because I kind of fucked that up when I was doing mine, right?
Okay.
Looking at the methodology will
Go
get
back.
you.
Go back to yours. Sure.
Okay. So, by the way, your way is good in the sense of you do find the negative health consequences of broccoli.
I just find the
way that
information that nobody else is talking about. I don't want to live in an echo chamber. And if I'm only searching things to support what I already believe, all I'm doing is creating a perpetual echo chamber that continues to tell me the same thing over and over and over again. But what it doesn't do is educate me. And what I'm demonstrating here is that 5 seconds of being willing to think outside of the box and question the mainstream, if you will, for lack of a better word, narrative surrounding any topic, even one as simple as broccoli, you start to realize, holy crap, I've been told this is good my whole life. My mom, my grandma, my aunties, my uncles, my teachers, everybody told me broccoli was fantastic for me. But then here's the thing. I looked it up and I found out that simply by doing it, hold on, broccoli not only is bad for me, it's toxic. It could be bad for my thyroid. It could be bad for my stomach. It could be bad for my heart. Now, emphasis, could be. These don't mean that this is conclusive, but what it tells me is there's a significant enough piece of information out there that the previous idea is by definition no longer true. Like, can we agree that there is this much information out here? We can no longer conclusively say in truth that broccoli is healthy. Right? So this is my process. I said challenge everything. Challenging it doesn't necessarily give you the answer, but it lets you know if the answer you previously believed was true or not. So I can't say I'm a broccoli professional by now. I would be naive to say that. I would also be naive to say that broccoli is unhealthy. I wouldn't be smart to say that. What I can say with confidence, broccoli is not necessarily healthy. And if you're running around telling everybody that broccoli's that broccoli's healthy, broccoli's good for you, you are incorrect. Because there are plenty of pieces of information, there are plenty of pieces of research, there are plenty of pieces of information from all kinds of methods that talk about issues with broccoli surrounding hypothyroidism, right? Surrounding all of these different things. So what I now know is that this narrative that broccoli is good for you is false. It's incorrect. For the broccoli lovers out there, guess what? All they're going to do is tell me, oh, that's not true. What's your source? And they're going to try to go out of their way to disprove this thing and disprove that thing and disprove this thing. Why? Because they're married to their echo chamber. They are so married to their narrative that they will fight any presentation to the alternative. My question is why? What did broccoli ever do for you, bro? Right? Like, shout out to Jess. What did broccoli even do for you, bro? Like, broccoli's not your friend. Broccoli just out here chilling in the forest. Like, first of all, what forest did you ever see broccoli in the first place? So now what I'm realizing is that there is a world full of people telling me something is true, that 5 seconds of questioning things opens me up to an entire other world of perspective. That's the importance of questioning things. Not because it's necessarily going to give you answers day one. It's simply going to let you know that there's a world outside of the one you were told existed.
Okay. So I sort of agree with you. I think actually your method is a lot more efficient, right? And I do agree with that. The issue though is like, okay, so where do we end up here? Is broccoli unhealthy for you now? Or is broccoli overall healthy? Like, where do we end up with your method, right?
What we found out is that there's enough information to tell me I shouldn't blindly trust broccoli. So what does that mean? Well, this goes back to my original conclusion, right? My original conclusion says that, okay, I'm going to ask the question. And when I ask that question, I have to ask myself the very next question is, well, how relevant is this to me? Right? Well, let's say I'm going out here, and I'll say this from personal experience. I have lived almost 2 decades with extreme gut issues. Mm-hmm. By default, would you agree that it's probably important for me to know if there are issues with things I'm putting in my body? Blindly trusting because everybody says it's safe is probably not a good methodology for me, right?
Right.
So in my example, it probably makes sense to me to confirm, which means that the skill set of questioning things doesn't require me to go out of my way to understand the historical creation of broccoli. It doesn't. What it does tell me is that, hold on, everybody's saying broccoli's healthy. I have huge health issues. So my assumption is if I'm trusting everybody and popular consensus blindly, I'm putting myself at risk. However, by being willing to be the type of person who question things, I'm opening myself up to the reality. Not that I understand broccoli fully, but that maybe I shouldn't blindly trust it. That's what I need. That does for me. It lets me know, don't blindly trust things. So if I got an iron gut, everything's good. Nothing makes me sick. I like broccoli. It has no issues for me. I have no health problems. Maybe temporarily, there's not that necessarily big of a reason to look into it. But here's what's interesting. Because there was an issue, here's what I found, and I'm going to show you. Because I have researched most foods, full transparency. 20 years of gut issues put you in a position to do that, right? So here's something that you probably did not know. Most people don't know. You would have to do a lot of research to find this. Why? Well, because it's not very popular unless you do the research. So where did I start? I'll show you this. I'll show you how I got there, and then I'll show you the conclusion, the destination, and then I can walk you through how I got there. Broccoli is not even a natural vegetable.
I knew that.
Broccoli is a human creation, right?
I did know that.
How many people do you think don't know that?
A lot of people.
A lot of people probably don't know that. Let me ask you a question. If vegetables are supposed to be healthy for us, which is an arguable perspective.
Well, you know, most vegetables are man-made.
That's not true.
A lot of
I don't know about most. I'm sure there are a bunch, but I definitely don't think it's most.
Like for
most
instance,
are genetically modified now.
Yeah, that's what do you mean by man-made versus modified?
Yeah, I guess man-made is essentially a version of being genetically modified, so we can call it the same thing. Yeah, agreed. Right, a lot of breeds of tomatoes, but how they're done can be questionable. How they go about it.
If you look at natural corn, like the kernels are like not edible. Yeah. Basically,
that's why most corn today is actually really horrible for you. Corn is actually pretty bad for most people.
Corn has a lot of sugar.
It's also extremely susceptible to mold. People with mycotoxin exposure, right? So here's the thing.
Yeah.
What you start finding out is I didn't start waking up one day with this crazy idea. Let me see if broccoli is a genetically modified man-made existence. I didn't start doing that. Who does that, right? I started with, I'm getting sick. Everybody's telling me this is healthy. Let me just ask, hey, is this really healthy? Is this bad for me? Maybe. Let me question the contrary. Brings up a bunch of different information. And if that's important to you, you continue to search. You continue to read. You read the articles. And as much as people have, I think it is, here's my opinion on anecdotal information. I think it is just as irresponsible to dismiss anecdotal information as it is to blindly accept anecdotal information. I think that it is extremely irresponsible to say, oh, well, that's anecdotal and just write it off. Because that's stupid. That's firsthand experience. In a criminal case, an eyewitness testimony is extremely valuable. But that's the only place it's valuable? I don't know that that's necessary, because here's the thing. Eyewitness testimony can be fallible. But to say that because it's not done by a peer-reviewed study, a witness who watched the guy break into the store is no longer viable is naive. A person's firsthand account should be accounted for as evidence. I believe it should, under the majority of the circumstances. So science has this weird thing where it came to the conclusion that anything that wasn't peer-reviewed is anecdotal. That's stupid. I don't think I think that's stupid. I think it's naive. I think you should build safeguards around it. But I think that what we call anecdotal evidence is also called firsthand experience. And I think it should be measured and it should be taken into account. And I think that the medical system that we know today is behind, partially due to that exact perspective. We dismiss firsthand experience and call it anecdotal and not realize that it's actually, that's an expert witness, bro, because they've been going through this for 20 years. You don't know them. You should probably listen to them.
So Can I give my opinion on that?
Of course.
So here's the thing. Court cases are much different than when we start getting to something that can be proven by the scientific method. You can't prove someone murdered via the scientific method. That's
Scientific
not
method's fallible.
to an extent, obviously, right? But it's probably the best method we have for knowing physical truths, right? It's what's created the fact. It's the process by which we were able to create how you and me are able to communicate with tens of people right now, right? That was created through the scientific method. It's created an insane amount of technology around us, right? It is an incredibly good way of knowing physical truths. So, where anecdotal evidence, how I view it is it's a lower type of evidence. It shouldn't be dismissed. But if the scientific method is telling you something different than anecdotal evidence, the scientific method is probably right. I can give an example of where this happens, right?
Mhm.
So, for instance, right? And we would have to get into the like it's gonna be a whole thing, right? Where we're not gonna get into flat earth right now. But the reason why there are several different reasons why the earth isn't. I don't know if I want to get into this one. I think there are
Do it,
better.
bro. YOLO.
But I
YOLO,
want to
bro.
do.
Eat
I
it.
know. I want to do one that like we agree on. I don't want to do one that
I don't.
that.
Who says we disagree
I'm
on
not
flat
saying
Earth?
that you believe in flat Earth. I don't even want to get into one that's all right. Fuck it. We'll do flat Earth. So, for instance, the many different like the scientific method, right? Anecdotally, the Earth. Everyone thinks anecdotally the Earth is flat, right? None of us have a personal experience with the world being round. From our perspective, it is flat, right?
Right.
Every single time, right? But the scientific method shows us it isn't through several different things, right? We knew the earth was round way before we even had things that are like make it very true, like people going into space or satellites, right? Um, these are make it much more obvious. And the fact that we can observe everything else around us, like other planets being around, right? And I can get into the different evidences for it, right? Of the scientific method, but certain things with gravity wouldn't work for flat. The way that the moon becomes dark would be very different if we were flat. If we had a flat Earth, for instance, there would be times where we're looking at the moon and there'd just be a shadow just in the center of it, like a coin, right? Like this, right? There'd be a shadow straight in the middle of it. This is what convinced me the earth is round, right? But in
That's the
essence,
thing. That thing right there is what convinced you.
yeah, because if the
All right.
earth was flat, because if it was flat, the way the shadow would come across the moon wouldn't be different. It just would be. There would be times where it's like the side of the coin and there'd be two sides that had light on it, right? We can talk about
Okay.
that later. Anywho, I'm doing a bet. The point is the reason why the scientific method is better is because we're removing any biases from our personal experiences.
That's
Because
definitely not true.
well, yeah, it is. I mean, if you're doing it right, it is, right?
Sure. Sure.
Obviously, if you're doing it wrong, yeah, like you can do it in a way where bias is still there and you fuck it up, right? If you're doing it in a way that's actually done as good as you can with the process, then you are removing bias, right? Well, something
Okay.
like anecdotal evidence is it's all bias. It's literally a personal perspective. It's like only bias, right? While a scientific method removes bias probably as much as possible. It's the best method I know to remove bias generally.
Question for you.
Now, okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Try.
I was just going to say with food is really complicated because broccoli, for instance, and we can research the studies, right? And like literally go through it. For most people, broccoli is healthy. There are cases where it's not. And then now we got to compare for how many people is it healthy versus how many people is it not healthy. The issue is that an anecdotal broccoli fucked me up. That doesn't tell me any evidence for whether it'll fuck you up, right? That's the issue with anecdotal evidence when it comes
That's
to
not
things
true,
like
though.
that.
Because the information doesn't have to mean, because you're assuming that they have to be universally true to be accurate. But your own example disputes that. By definition, we're comfortable saying that broccoli is healthy because it's healthy for a lot of people.
Right.
Okay. But can we agree that it's also unhealthy for a lot of people?
Well, it depends how. Now what we're doing is for how many people is it healthy, and for how many people
Exactly.
is it not?
So before we
right?
come to that conclusion, which I think is a question that the majority of people have not even researched, if the base foundation is that it has to be healthy for a lot of people in order for it to be healthy, well, then it's unhealthy for a lot of people. So by that same definition, it's also unhealthy. If you're
Well, now
saying
we're
that the
arguing about
existence of nutrients,
what makes a food healthy or not.
well, if
right?
you're saying that the existence of nutrients
In my
equals
head,
healthy,
in my head, if healthy means if food is healthy, it's healthy for most people. That's what my definition of healthy is.
but
Anything could be unhealthy, right? Or could be healthy. Sugar could be healthy, right? For a diabetic who's sugar.
by your own definition, that's not a very scientific process. It's healthy for
Right.
most people, so it's healthy.
Well,
Okay,
no,
well,
what I
you're
would
just
do is
dismissing the
I'd
people
find
for whom
out,
it's not healthy.
like, if we really want to delve into it, what I would do right now is find out, okay, Keanu, I think that was actually a really good point. I think you researching like the negative effects, like starting with like the opposite, will get you quicker to what we're actually looking for, right?
That's all it
I
comes
think it
down
would
to. If we're talking, I think if we're talking about processes, bro, that's it.
I like your starting point. I actually do like your starting point, and I'm going to adopt it most of the time. I don't think it necessarily leads you to the right conclusion, though. I think it's a good starting point, so you start getting rid of some of your own biases. But like, for instance, so with the broccoli question right now, right? Like what I would do is I'd be like, okay, so we see these negative health effects. When do these negative health effects come into play? So like you put in, what did you put in? Like, so you put in, what did you put in? Is broccoli
Is
unhealthy
broccoli
for
bad
you?
for you? Is broccoli bad for
Bad
you?
for you?
No,
Right?
no, I actually said why is broccoli bad for you?
Why is broccoli bad for you? So,
And then I saw the conclusions, and then what I'll normally do is I'll look for the top handful of conclusions that Google finishes for me, and I'll start with my base one that I was going to go with, right?
right.
I'll start with mine, and then I'll come back and I'll do all of the other ones, right? So I'll go
Let's just
for
look through a few of them, right? Like, let's just see.
just start with the base one. Don't even go
Let's
with
just
a
start with this
specific one.
Whatever. So, 9 foods to avoid if you're diagnosed with hypothyroidism. This isn't a study. This is just some article, right?
Yep.
So I'm just clicking the first thing you clicked. That's what I'm doing right now, right? That's what, or
Just put you.
what
Just put you.
It was you.
That's where I go first.
And then it came up, and then I would assume you just click the first one, or what would you do?
I just I start with the one I was gonna type, which is why is broccoli bad for you?
Okay.
I look for anything interesting, and then I go back and look through them all.
Okay. This guy's arguing kind of my point, or what I was gonna get into.
Sure.
Is that
And
you could argue for anything being bad for you, right? Depending on the factors. That's the weird thing with food. Like anything could be bad for a single human being.
But see, here's my point. This is like, listen to the road that you're going down. It's like you're almost trying to defend why broccoli is still good for you.
I'm not
And
saying
my point is, I don't care. That's the thing. I don't care. You are married to your pre-existing narrative. And so your default right now, what you're trying to do now is acknowledge the value in my process, but still poke holes in my conclusion. Because at the end of the day, your goal is not to grow in information. Your goal is to find support for what you hold on. No. Let me finish my point.
Okay.
You're demonstrating right now what your intent is, Jonah. And by doing so, let me finish my point.
Okay.
You're demonstrating what your intent is. and by definition, demonstrating that you're going down a completely different road that I'm going down. You came into this with the idea that broccoli was good. And so you are looking for information to support your pre-existing worldview.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Then,
I'm looking
hold on.
through yours right now.
I know.
I'm not looking up information for my worldview if I'm looking through your process right now.
Let me know when I can finish my point, Pumpkin.
Okay, go on.
You sure? This is the part where Jonah gets tense, y'all. Can y'all see it?
Well, you're
like
now you're getting personal with it, so I'm getting a little flabbergasted. You're gonna have
Don't
to
be
forgive me.
flabbergasted, bro. Just let me finish my point. You're nothing to flabbergast about.
All right, fine.
You can be flabbergast free. I promise.
Okay.
Can I finish? If you don't want me to, I won't.
You can finish.
Thank you. All right. So here's my point, bro. Initially, your process was to research information that supported your preconceived idea. That was where you started. Didn't work out well because you didn't search it properly. That's fine. Then I came in and presented a different approach. And you said, ooh, I actually like that approach. But here's the thing. You changed your approach, but you didn't change your goal. Your goal was still to do the same thing, which was prove that broccoli is still good for you. And my point is, if you're truly living by the methodology that I'm espousing, you're going to have to let that go. This is what I mean when I say it's... Stop sharing for a second. This is what I mean, Jonah, when I say that it is simpler, but it's harder. Because by definition, confirmation bias is every single one of y'all's biggest crutch in most conversations. You have an emotional need to fit in. You have an emotional need for the world that you were told existed to make sense. It's the human experience. The great majority of us need that. And without that, we feel lost. We feel scared and we fight. Fight or flight kicks in when someone starts to convey to you that everything about the world you thought you knew may not be real. You will tangibly fight to defend that. It's a weakness of the human experience. And I'm sure there's some strengths into it that we could get into, but nevertheless, bro, my point is, as long as your default is to try to defend what you already believed, stop doing the research. Stop it. Wait, save your time. Your goal is to find information to support what you already believe. You can find information to support whatever you want. So if your goal is just to support what you already believed in the first place, save your time and just believe it. But my question that I would ask is, why is that so important to you? Right? Not you only, Jonah, in general. Why is it so important to you to continue to find confirmations that the world you believe in is true? Why are you so emotionally bound to that? What is so scary about the question, what if what I know to be true maybe isn't? So you approached my method, which I respect and appreciation. You gave credence to my method. You said you were going to adopt largely my method. I respect it. I appreciate that. But if you're adopting it for the goal of just coming to your own conclusions anyways, save the time. The benefit in my method isn't just in the process of the research. It's in the mindset that makes you research that way in the first place. And that mindset is question everything, not confirm everything. It's question, right? So when I came to this situation, researching the way I do, the foundation was not the intent of proving what I already believed. I actually started there because what I found is that I was already doing a good enough job unconsciously, without even trying, of proving what I wanted to believe in the first place. I had to create this process to stop myself from finding information to believe what I already believe, because it is so easy to just prove your own beliefs. That's why it's called confirmation bias. It is a bias that you're looking to confirm your beliefs. It's literally a cognitive reality. I didn't create this process to go and just do it a different way. I created this process for one intent: to police myself against proving what I already believe. That's why I did it. I said, DQ, you have a built-in mechanism that is going to push you back to what you already believe 100% of the time. If you're not going to do that, and you want to expand your mind, and you want to think different, and you want to experience a world that's different than the one that you've been exposed to, you have to intentionally police yourself. And you can't just do it once. You have to do it every single time until the habit changes. Well, how long does it take a habit to change? Well, it doesn't happen once. It's just like any other habit. You have to retrain your mind to do it. So if you come to this thing trying to just say, yeah, I'm going to use your thing, but I'm still going to look for information that supports, and I'm going to just try to disqualify all the people that say it's bad, well, then you're coming with the wrong intent. You're still coming to prove your own point. When I look at this, I don't have a horse in this race. When I look at this, here's my intent. People say broccoli is good for me. I don't know, and I don't freaking care. I am not married to it one way or another. So what am I going to do? I'm going to see what other people say, and I'm going to look at it as interesting. I'm not going to automatically discredit it, but I'm also not going to automatically give it credit. And I'm going to find enough information, and then if it is important enough to me, I'm going to test it for myself. Right? With food, it's really simple because you can test it. Right? But for me, bro, the foundational intent is everything. My process, I think, works well, and I appreciate you agreeing that my process works well. But it doesn't work that well if you're just trying to prove your original point anyways. You got to be willing to look at this. I think if you really want to actually grow as a human, you got to challenge your point and be willing to prove yourself wrong.
I think you just got misinterpreted what I said that made you go off on that tangent. I wasn't saying that it's definitely bad for you. It was just funny how or definitely good for you. It was just funny how the first article that I found was just some article talking about how you can make anything bad, which I'm like, okay, yeah, like that's, and then I said, yeah, that's like probably true. Like with food, you can probably make anything bad for you, right? That was just the funny thing that article came up. I'm not saying that like broccoli is, I'm not like emotionally attached to whether broccoli is good or bad for you. If we actually find compelling evidence that it's bad for you, then like I'm not gonna like go off. I'm not gonna like. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think you misinterpreted that statement. I just thought it was funny that was the first article that came up. That was literally.
Here's something that Jess says that really is interesting as well, right? There's been studies that found that your body reacts more poorly to foods that you believe is bad for you, which goes into epigenetics. Are you familiar with epigenetics at all?
Well, it's also placebo, but yeah.
Sure. Are you familiar with epigenetics?
I've heard the word, and I watched a YouTube video maybe like 10 years ago on it, so you'd have to remind me.
It's super interesting. We won't go into it. It's a different podcast. Epigenetics is very, very interesting. And it's one of the foundational beliefs within epigenetics is that what Jess is saying here, your brain, your mind actually has the ability to control how your body reacts to things because your brain is the control center of your body. It tells your cells how to react. What it's saying is that genetics are actually play a much smaller role in the outcome of your health than people realize. So if your parents had a disease, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have this disease. And there is tons of scientific evidence that supports this. This is a scientific thing that they've spent a lot of years espousing. It's actually a really, really cool theory. I would look into it for sure.
Okay.
I'm choking.
No,
but yeah,
okay.
so nevertheless, go ahead. Jonah, you're missing the point because you're defensively thinking and building the case as.
See, I don't know if these people are trolling me anymore. I'm like curious if people are trolling me. All I said was like, yeah, this is like, because this is probably true too, is that you could make any food toxic, right? Like for like, there are like, what I meant by healthy, I wanted to define the term was just healthy for the vast majority of people. If it's not healthy for the vast majority of people, right? Maybe it's like 50-50, then I wouldn't necessarily call it healthy or unhealthy, right? I'm just saying, look, like I think everyone just misinterpreted what I was saying right there. I'm open to broccoli not being healthy if we want to keep going through the Google search through your methodology.
No, I hear your point, and I don't think you were necessarily going to bat for broccoli like it's your homie. You know what I mean? That's not what I take into it. But
VeggieTales was pretty lit when I was a kid, you know.
Broccoli before
fucking with my boy broccoli.
Broccoli before bros.
I wanted to look up. There was like a Jonah Bible story VeggieTales, and I think Jonah was the broccoli. It's hard for me to remember.
That would be fire. Here's the thing, Jonah. What I don't think you realize, dude, is you have a propensity to defend the common narrative kind of blindly. And so you speak around topics that challenge it pretty automatically. And I think that's possibly
The
what they picked up on.
cucumber.
Was it broccoli? Was it broccoli? Is it
No, it was the
cucumber?
cucumber. It was the
Missed
cucumber.
opportunity. That's a definite
Fuck.
missed opportunity.
There is a broccoli in it though.
Let me
But
ask you a
sorry,
question,
keep
bro.
going.
Honest question. Do you think that medicine is science?
I don't know what you mean by that question.
Is
What does that
medicine science?
That doesn't need, like, I don't understand the question. Like
Do
when
you
you say
think the medical
medicine
industry
science,
is a scientifically founded industry?
you're talking about prescription drugs? Is that what we're
No,
talking
no.
about
I'm
right
talking about
Are we
if you
talking
go
about-
to the doctor and follow the
Uh-huh.
instructions of a doctor, is the
Uh-huh.
doctor giving you those instructions based on scientific, peer-reviewed, reliable data?
now? Generally, yes.
Okay. Here's my simple point. You were espousing that you didn't know whether or not there was a more reliable set of processes than double-blinded peer-reviewed data. That you don't know that there's anything better than that. Here's the thing, and this is my point. I don't have anything against science. I think science is fantastic. I think science has its place without question. I think you are naive if you blindly believe something because it carries the moniker science. I think we are responsible for thinking for ourselves. Go ahead.
Do you believe that I believe that because it
No, I'm
contains the
just-
moniker? Okay, I'm just double
No,
checking.
I'm generalizing. I'm saying a
Okay,
human
okay.
being is being naive, not as an insult, but by the definition of the word, we are being naive by just thinking that we should blindly believe something because science. I think that's naive. I think that you, as a human being, carry the responsibility of independent thought and the requirement of coming to your own conclusions, even if science says something different. And science has proven that. Because to your point, Jonah, most people in Western culture would agree that the medical industry is founded on science. Well, that same industry has come to the conclusion that nutrition bears very little benefit to the human body and pharmaceuticals do. But there are other countries who follow the exact same scientific method. Don't wave your hand. What I'm saying is accurate. You might be able to demonstrate examples where it's different, but as a general rule, most doctors will tell you that nutrition is not a primary solution for illness. Period. That's what they will tell you.
Type of illness.
Okay.
Like you can't.
But when
it
you go
depends
to
on the
other
illness,
countries,
but, like, keep
when you
going.
go to other countries, many of these countries have used the same scientific process to come to drastically different conclusions. Which science do you believe? And the point here, if there is two different countries who are using the exact same scientific method to examine the exact same illnesses, but are coming to drastically different conclusions, that tells us there are flaws in the scientific process. There are, by definition, flaws in peer-reviewed data and processes. You gotta be able to think for yourself. I don't think it's safe to just throw it away because it says science, but it's equally unsafe to just believe it because it says science. You should take it for what it is: information. That's it. Not fact, information. It is facts based on the information we have at the current moment, potentially, but facts are temporal. And that's why I think that thinking for yourself and questioning things is, again, like I said at the beginning, it's not a conspiratorial pursuit. I think it's an intellectual one. I think it's a responsible one, because by doing that, it's the only way you're going to have some sort of autonomy and the conclusions that your life comes to. The amount of people scientifically who have died because of illnesses that doctors said this is the only course of action. But then you go to a different doctor who suggests a different course of action. They're both trained by the same people, following the same science, using the same peer-reviewed data to support their perspectives, but coming to different conclusions. It's fallible, bro. This is why I am overwhelmingly emphatic about this point. If we're talking about how do you come to truth, I think truth starts by questioning everything.
Right.
I think
So
that's
can I
just the
respond to that?
responsible way. Huh?
Can I respond to that?
Of course, dude.
So what you're getting at is what I would call bad science versus good science. You can take the moniker of science, do experimental research, that where you fucked up the methodologies and fucked up the sample size, all sorts of stuff, and come up with a biased study that was quote unquote done with the scientific method. That doesn't mean that the scientific method in and of itself is flawed or has flaws.
I hear you, but I'm not referring to those extreme examples. I'm just referring to basic American Western medicine.
Well, what are we talking about? Can you give me an example?
American Western medicine, dude. Pick a topic in American. The entire thing, yes.
That Tylenol gets rid of headaches.
What do you mean? No, I'm talking about.
I don't know what you mean. I needed more explanation. Like, what do you mean by the entire fucking thing? Do you think that, like, for instance, if you take antibiotics, that's not going to get rid of a lot of bacterial infections?
Let me I don't understand what you mean. When you go to a doctor and the doctor tells you need to do X, what percentage of trust do you put on that advice?
I'm probably like 80%. Probably.
Okay. I put 50 to 60.
Okay.
50 to 60.
Yeah.
No, I'm not. Here's why. They're a doctor. They know something. Right. But you know what else that I know? I know that what they know is extremely biased, based on an extremely narrow-minded echo chamber that's funded by people who don't have my best interest at heart. So by definition, they are given bad information. It's irresponsible for me to just trust that they're going to give me good results when they're being taught from a bad playbook. Why do I know that? Because I approached this information objectively and was willing to remove my bias to come to the conclusion that I realized that these pharmaceutical companies who are poisoning us on a daily basis actually fund and decide what goes in the medical textbooks. By definition, basic deductive reasoning tells me that if you're a pharmaceutical company who wants to make billions upon billions of dollars to pitch your product, and you get to teach the doctors while they're in school how to treat things, it's in my best interest to teach you, by the way, the solution for this, prescribe this. The solution for that, you need this. The solution for that, now their whole brain is, how do I help people? I have to find the appropriate prescription. Their brain defaults treatment to prescription. Their whole foundation of understanding is founded in something that I would argue is unethical, at least. So I shouldn't trust. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to learn other helpful things in the medical process. Of course they are, which is why I'm not just blindly throwing their information in the garbage. There is going to be information they're going to learn about health. And they also have what science would call anecdotal, but they also have firsthand experience. And that firsthand experience may have caused them to encounter someone beforehand. Now, depending on the type of person they are, is going to conclude what they learned from that experience. If they're a closed-minded doctor that can't be taught nothing because I'm a doctor now, I went to school for 10 years, and what I told me at school is right, and Google's going to be wrong. All right, genius, cool. So you're just comfortable with your patients dying because your medical degree was right. This is why there are articles in PubMed. You can look these up. There are articles in PubMed about people who were stage 4 cancer, terminal, done, less than a week to live, less than 2 weeks to live. You can look these up in PubMed. You may not know this, but there is an entire school of thought out there that believes that a decently large portion of cancers are not cancer at all. They're misdiagnosed fungal infections. There's a lot of scientists who believe this. There are a lot of doctors who believe this. But do we hear about them? No. Why? Because the common narrative tells a different story, and people who go against the common narrative are considered quacks or foolish or whatever name you want to call. Because what did we say at the beginning? When you're the person who wants to go into the face of the convention belief, all of a sudden you get mocked, you get attacked, right? There are countless doctors you can find online who are fantastic doctors who literally lost their license because they refused to follow convention. Cool. So there's this whole school of thought that a lot of cancer is not in fact cancer, it's fungal infections. Well, some of these doctors were able to push hard enough and keep their license in the midst of challenging these ideas, and they were able to do studies. So there's over 1,000, maybe a couple thousand at this point of people, a couple weeks left to live, done. Stage 4 cancer, all treatments have failed. Radiation, chemotherapy, experimental treatments, all of that has failed. So the doctors that were there finally go to the families and like, hey, we got something, nothing else has worked. Well, unfortunately, some of those people may have been approached earlier on and they're like, no, we're going to trust the doctors. We're not doing that weird stuff. The dangers of thinking with a closed mind, the dangers of not challenging things, right? But at this point, these people have nothing left to lose. So they go on an antifungal regimen, which, to be clear, for the most part, the biggest side effect is like a stomach ache. It's basic cleansing side effects. You don't really feel bad.
Yeah.
Thousands of cases in PubMed, thousands of full remission within weeks. Full remission. They never had cancer. Never had it. They had a fungal infection, which mirrored cancer. And there was just these numbers that were able to make it into the medical journals. How many other anecdotal examples exist that are not allowed to be told?
There are thousands. You realize that, right?
Okay, but the fact that what we just saw
anecdotal means like 2 or 3, or like only a couple.
And that's my point. The majority of the stuff that's written off as anecdotal are thousands.
Well, no, I wouldn't consider that.
Most doctors would consider FODMAP diets. Most doctors would consider the FODMAP diet anecdotal. I have talked to them, and they call that anecdotal. There is millions of people who have thrived using a FODMAP diet. But there are doctors who, because their teacher in medical school said it was stupid, they say it's stupid. And they advise their patients as if it's stupid. And what happens is you have this trickle-down effect of people who just believe what they're told without thinking for themselves. For me, bro, there are life or death ramifications with not being willing to challenge convention. This is why I think this is so important. So if medicine science, what's that?
Health is a complicated one. Like, I 100% agree with you that, like, the issue with health is you can have a study, and I'm not saying, like, I have no idea what you said about the fungal stuff. I have no idea whether that's true or not. I just don't know. I've never heard of it, right? But let's say you have a study that broccoli is, and I'm just doing this hypothetically for a second.
Yeah.
Let's say that broccoli is like 95%. For 95% of people, it's healthy, right? Let's just say, hypothetically. That means that if every American eats broccoli, there's going to be like millions of people where it's unhealthy for you, right? Just statistically and math-wise, right? Like, I think that's, I'll even do the math real quick.
I agree with that.
I think it's like, that's like
by those numbers. Million. Okay, so by those numbers, is that still anecdotal?
So it's not anecdotal, but what I'm trying to, where I'm going with this is, there are general health truths, and then there are truths for you when it comes to health, right? What doctors are going off of is what's generally healthy or not healthy for most people. This is flawed to an extent because not every single person is the same. You could be dealing with you could be one of the 17.5 million people. So this is an issue for doctors. How do I treat anyone who just walks in? How do I know which one is which?
Educate yourself.
If they're a good doctor, hopefully what they're doing is they're saying, look, generally, we're going to start with what usually this means. We're going to start there, right? You have a stomach ache. I'm not going to assume stomach cancer. I'm going to assume you ate something bad, because 9 times out of 10, that's usually what happens, right? So I'm going to ask you questions and be like, okay, when did you start feeling this? Blah, blah, blah. And then you go through symptoms, right? And you do triage, right? Now, there are issues with health, right? And there are issues that we don't understand with every single person, right? My doctors usually have told me this. This is just what my doctors have said. I don't know what your doctors have said to you, Keanu. I'll give an example just from my personal experience, just to like illustrate this. What my doctors did, for instance, when I had stomach issues, they did a ton of tests. They were like, they just got rid of the most common symptoms. They were like, we're going to make sure you don't have cancer. We make sure you don't have an ulcer, whatever. They did the tube thing, gastro something or other. Yeah, that, checked to see if there's anything there. And they kind of left it and were just like, look, we have no idea. You're not dying. We're going to leave it at that. And I remember being super frustrated, being like, what the fuck? Like, I still have a stomach ache, right? And none of these goddamn doctors told me it could be psychological. I was just dealing with a fuck ton of anxiety. And I didn't understand that those two could be related and that it would feel like a real pain, right? My assumptions about how I assumed that the brain didn't affect the body, basically, right? Like I was like, how the fuck could those be linked? So at least my opinion with doctors is that you just have to know what they're good for. In my opinion, they're good for making sure you're not dying of something. Do they make mistakes? Sure. I think so. Now, the question that I have for you, Kihano, so based on everything that you said with the fungal thing, whatever, there are thousands of cases of fungal, yada, yada, right? And we could just do cancer as one. Should we completely throw out the doctor's perspective and just start with fungal every time it's diagnosed with cancer?
But that's like, go ahead. I'm sorry. So sorry.
Or should we do something else? Like
Well,
I guess what would you suggest to do in that situation? Let's just say.
I would follow my process. This is where it gets hard because what becomes easy to do, right? So on one side, I want to believe everything that the world tells me. Science, doctors, I got to trust it. It's science. It's a doctor. You don't believe in the science? Oh, you're an idiot. You're a conspiracy theorist. Okay, cool. So I'm going to believe all that. But then you go through your experience and you realize, holy crap, this science is stupid. By the way, the same science that was telling us to trust the science 4 years later is saying, oh crap, the science was wrong and we've killed a lot of people. And there is a huge problem out there. This is a fact.
This is a weird way of categorizing science, but okay, keep going.
But this is how they were categorizing it when they were trying to gaslight society to follow their orders, trust the science. And they were saying, yeah, science. Yeah, I was trying not to use the word, but yeah.
It's a whole nother thing. I think that was an anomaly. I think that was anyways, keep going though.
But here's the point. Even though it may have been an anomaly, it still supports my point. When bullies come together to tell you, believe me, trust me, I'm a scientist. You got to trust the science. You got to do what you're told. And you follow like a good little boy and girl, it's dangerous. Question everything. Think for yourself. Develop the habit of recognizing that if you're getting too far to the left or the right, you're probably losing yourself to emotions. Control your emotions. Don't let them control you. Have them, but don't let them have you. And so for me, when you go back to my point, it would be easy to start off saying, trust the science, just believe what you're told. But you and I have both experienced where the doctors who went to medical school and were taught the science still couldn't help me, which means the science is fallible. It was incomplete. They didn't have the answers.
I mean, also the same science helped me figure out what was wrong with me too. I looked up afterwards. I'm like, what the fuck could this be? And then I looked up, oh, this could be psychological.
Correct. And you know how many years existed in between before the second science that you had to find on your own figured it out? Which means that for arguably decades, maybe longer, science told you there was no connection. Science is just now figuring out that there is a connection. And it's such a new discovery that most doctors don't even know it. That's why the doctors couldn't tell you. Because it's such a new discovery. Here's what happened. It's new. And it's being put through this strenuous process that you're trying to espouse is reliable. The problem is that reliable process is literally the reason it hasn't reached back to generalized doctors. Because they're putting it through a freaking milk strainer for no reason. It's not milk. It doesn't go through that. So all you're doing is you're not vetting accurately. You're just slowing down the process with your own bias. And as a result, people go into doctors every single day. And you got the left hand telling you one thing using science. And then you got the right hand telling you the opposite thing, also using science. And these two science-based processes are arguing with each other and conflicting with each other because they can't get on the same page. Why? because the scientific process isn't allowing them to do so.
Well, the scientific process has it. The scientific process doesn't always come to like one conclusion,
Bro,
right?
but this is my point. This is my point. Like, you can try as hard as you can to defend it. And it has its merits. I'm not saying it's a completely flawed process, but what I'm saying, bro, is you at some point gotta be willing to accept, you know what? All right, stop. Let me stop defending this dude. He's not my friend. Scientific process got flaws. And I've been personally experienced. I've had firsthand experience of those flaws. It is flawed. It does not work, which by definition means it works in some cases, but not every time. So that is why it is responsible. It is incumbent upon me to do my own research and think for yourself. This is why thinking for yourself and questioning things isn't just helpful. It should be a requirement for healthy living. So to your point, am I going to start by believing the science and then all of a sudden now think that everything's fungus? No. What am I going to do is when I'm wondering if it's fungus, I'm going to question that too. Because not everything's fungus. Just not everything's listen to the doctors. Everything is its own thing. And that's why you have to question it. You got to ask the questions. You got to do your homework. It's hard. It's hard. It's simple, but it's hard because it forces you to train a part of your brain that unfortunately the world we live in does not train. It's a muscle we have lost. And I think it's the same muscle that caused us to be able to survive for as many years as we have. And now that muscle is dormant. And this is why we're arguing about the stupid shit that we argue about in society today. Because we are so freaking stupid. We have devolved into arguing about stupidity because we have not figured out the process of filtering and saying, yo, hold on. Just to be clear, just because everybody says this is a thing we should be doing or thinking or believing, that doesn't make sense, bro. Just because it's popular doesn't mean it's right. Let me pause for a second and think critically.
This is also pretty funny. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that you don't need a peer review study for that, bro. You talk to one of the homies who's had that many tacos from Taco Bell in the middle of the night. You should be able to figure that out on your own. But that's my point. Like to reiterate that final point, bro. This is how we get to a society where we are arguing about the world's most ridiculous things and debating truths that should not be debated. Because we have gone so far off the deep end in our ability to think critically that everything is up for grabs and we just believe it because it's popular and have no concept of being able to actually think critically. This is what happens when you don't do that.
By the way, I totally agree with you. You should question things, right? I'm not saying don't not question things. You should question things. You should try to figure out things, especially with health. Health is a really complicated one, right? My only contention with you of anything you've said so far is you would agree you could have a process that's really good. You could have a really good sales process, for instance, but then one person just follows that process poorly. You would agree with that, right?
Of course.
I would say that what you're dealing with when you're dealing with two conflicting scientific conclusions is somebody used the process either incorrectly or badly, depending, right? That's where you're seeing most of these cases that you're talking about, right? You're right. There are hundreds of examples of doctors actually being there. Like I remember I watched this whole video about like in the 50s, they weren't washing. There was like this huge epidemic. I forgot exactly what it is, but there was this huge epidemic.
They weren't washing their broccoli.
No, shut up. They were like doctors who were like helping deliver babies, and like in this one hospital, en masse, the women would always die. The mother would always die. It was like 95% of the women were dying, and the doctors were not washing their hands or using gloves. Right. This was like maybe like 30s or 20s or 30s, right? And there was one guy who was like, what the fuck, guys? You guys are killing these women. Wash your hands and watch what happens. And they wouldn't believe it for like a decade or so until like the government came in and forced them to do it. And then immediately the problem was solved, right? So your problem is true. This is a problem with human bias. I would just say that it's not that the scientific process is bad. It's that when humans do it incorrectly or aren't willing to look at their own egos, that's when we come into situations, right? I still believe well done double-blind studies is better evidence than anecdotal evidence. You shouldn't throw out anecdotal evidence. It's not like it's nothing, but generally go with the double-blind study first, then go with the anecdotal evidence to see what's true and what isn't.
So let me ask you a question.
The order you should go in, right? Obviously, if like what the doctors are saying doesn't fucking work or even is worse, then it's like, okay, I'm going to start looking for other things. I'm going to start looking at anecdotal evidence because you're not getting it right, right? I've been to the doctor most of my life, right? I'd say probably 8 out of 10 times they get it right, depending on what the issue is. So I gave one example where they got it wrong, but at least generally in my life, they are getting it generally right if it's an easy thing. If it's a hard thing, it gets harder because then you need a really good doctor. But anyway, that's my opinion of what you said. I agree with most of what you said. It's just that's my difference. Is like I think these are two people just doing the process, some doing it better and some doing it worse.
So
the
let me ask you this. My argument was not to necessarily refute the value of a double-blinded study.
Mhm.
It was simply to state that I place independent thought over that as our personal responsibility, meaning that my responsibility to think critically and question everything ranks higher on my to-do list than trusting a double-blinded study. That's not a reflection of my of the strength or weakness of a double-blinded study. It's just that just because it's a double-blinded study, I'm still responsible for thinking for myself.
You got to like interpret it and like actually apply it to your situation. It might have nothing to do with your situation. Is that what you mean?
Correct. Yes, but here let's delve into that a little bit more quickly. You said, of course, like that's just assumed and understood. But I would argue that it's not. It's not assumed or understood. There are countless people who are dead today, who are not alive on this planet any longer because they went into a doctor. The doctor gave them advice that they themselves said, this doesn't feel right. I don't trust this, but I'm going to do it anyways because trust the science. Because who am I? Because there are countless people who have experienced negative things in their life because they did what they were told, even if something in them told them otherwise. Why? Because as a society, we have been trained like good little gerbils to get that part of our decision-making process out of our lives. So I'm not refuting the importance or the validity necessarily of the things that you're saying. I am simply stating that the ability to question things and think critically, even at fear of reprisal, of pushback, of people thinking you're crazy, of all these different things, I think that it is a missing trait that needs to be brought back to us. I think life and death depends on the ability to do that. So when you say, yeah, of course, it's not, yeah, of course, because most of us don't. We will trust and do what the doctor said. I watched my dad before he died, arguably listening to doctors deal with that exact same situation. And I'm like, why are you doing that? That is going to kill you. He's no longer with us. My grandmother, his mother, 78-year-old woman, 76-year-old woman, died in a hospital because they listened to doctors, I would argue. And I could go through the list, right? These are just two examples in my personal family. I could point to hundreds more, right? So this is why, here's what this is the point, right? So what's the point of the podcast today? I love this.
that.
This is good. This needs to be a t-shirt. Here's the point. When we talk about the process, bro, when we talk about processes, this is my takeaway. When you see me out here and we joke, right? in these crazy belief systems. You know why I'm okay having crazy belief systems? Because of
'Cause
what
you're
we
crazy.
discussed today.
A what?
Also because I'm crazy. Because of what we discussed today. I
Sure.
don't look at people mocking my perspective as a sign that I'm crazy. It's usually a sign that you're on the right track, unfortunately. But unfortunately, we are also not taught that in life. We are taught to fit in. We're taught to make friends and to be accepted. But that's not the way you survive in the type of world that we live in. You survive by questioning things. So if the question for me is, what's the best way to process information? This is why this is the answer I give. Why? Because in summary, we live in a world where, bro, every single day they're lying to us. They are lying to us. Whether we're talking about health and medicine, whether we're talking about the goodness or the badness of foods,
Okay, so
whether
that's
we're
where you
talking
go that's where you go farther than I would go. Do you think they're purposefully lying? Like,
100%.
sometimes they
Now,
are.
I can't say in
Sometimes
every situation, but in the situations that we discussed, 100% of the time.
I think 100? You sure? Wait, hold on. This is my
Let me clarify that for the sake of generalizing. I don't think every single situation is 100%, but I think in the category. So 100% the political world that we're in, they're lying to us 100%. Are they lying 100% of the time? Not necessarily, but they are 100% lying, right?
Wait, what I don't understand the two differences
If we're
between those two
talking
things.
about politics, 100% they're lying. I'm not saying they're lying
Oh, that they're
100% of the
lying about
time.
something? That everyone is
Yeah,
lying about
but
something?
the
Gotcha.
foundational motive is dishonesty
Sure.
because
Okay.
of an agenda that they don't want us to see. So they tell us something different. It's sleight of hand. It's the magician at the birthday party, right? They don't actually have a rabbit in their hat, Jonah. Fun fact, right? It just looks like they do. And this is the news,
Wait, are you
right?
sure?
I'm pretty sure. My uncle was a magician. Fun fact.
What if they do
My
have a
my
rabbit?
uncle was a very well-known magician.
Wait, okay, hold on. Before we get
And
into
I know
politics,
some of
can
the
I ask
tricks.
you a question?
Yes,
Can I ask
please
you a
do.
question? With the doctor thing, you're 100% right. Doctors do give bad advice and people die from it. I guess my question to you is, do you think that doctors save more lives or kill
Depends
more
on the
people?
doctor. Depends on the doctor. I think if you're going
Okay.
into it to a triage doctor in the emergency room, they're
Let's say
probably
most
saving
let's
way
just say
more
most
lives.
doctors. Like, just
And that's
the
a really hard
general.
thing, right? Because you're talking about, like, what are you talking about? A specialist? You're talking about like a general practitioner? Are they working in the emergency room? Are they just working at like a
Let's just say, I mean, in my head, it's all the same shit. So you can differentiate however you want. You can say, look, a specialist, 20% right, whatever, right? I don't know how you think about it. In my head, doctors fuck up because they're human, right? And they have biases that make them miss things, right? Which is what I think you're talking about.
Mhm.
And then, but I would still say that like 80% of doctors are good doctors that save more people than they accidentally kill, right?
Okay.
I think it's just human error. That's my belief based on, honestly, just my personal anecdotes throughout my life and through other people's lives that I know, and from the few studies that I've read from general doctor stuff. That's what seems to be true to me. I haven't done insane research. Would be crazy to find out doctors kill more people than they save, but I would say generally they're saving more people than they kill. I'd say like I'm 80% confident in that. So I was just curious from your perspective, where it sounds like you're 60% based on your previous answer or something like that. I don't know. Just what do you think of that?
Hold on. I'm going to um I'm
He's
trying to find
flumbergasted.
I'm trying to pull up
He's
something for you.
flumbering right now, guys. Flumbering. Look up that word.
Um Hold
Just
on.
kidding.
I'm going to show you something. Okay, here we go.
Water.
You said based on your last statement.
Okay. That's true.
So I don't know how many people they help versus hurts. But the fact that medical errors or medical malpractice is the third leading cause of death in the United States, doesn't that put a pretty interesting light on the very point you just made?
Sure, but it doesn't answer the question I just made either.
Again, but what's the original point? This is the habit that I'm trying to instill here, Jonah. This shouldn't necessarily give you an answer. But what it does is it paints a picture. It gives you information that lets you know the world that I live in is not the world that I necessarily thought was true. I was under the impression that doctors are a safe way to save myself, but those same doctors are the third leading cause of death when they should be the number one stopper of death. They're the third leading cause of death.
Well, both technically could be true.
Maybe, but here's my point. I just look at this and I say, I would look at that as interesting information. Now let me answer your question specifically. I don't know the answer, bro. I would probably default to your logic, right? I don't know what they help more than hurt. And here's the thing. I actually feel really badly just generalizing the phrase doctors, because I think there's a lot of fantastic human beings in the medical industry, fantastic human beings who probably do help a lot of people. But I know fantastic human beings with good intentions that are not capable of helping the people they set out to help.
Keanu, I'm going to need to let you keep going. I need to get headphones because my speaker's back.
Your thing's dying?
Keep hitting.
So that's what I think, right? Like, I think that is a who are just as much sheep as the rest, which I think is a decent argument. And so this is the tough part. I really do have a hard time talking about doctors as a generality like this, because I know people in the medical industry who are great people. So this is with all due love and respect towards them. I don't mean this disrespectfully. What I mean is that when you're trained into a system that teaches you to do what you're told and not ask questions, the first thing I'm going to do is say, why don't you want me asking questions? And so my argument to everybody that's here tonight, if the question that we're espousing, if the question we're presenting to you guys is, how do you make decisions? How do you come to the conclusions that you come to that cause you to follow the life that you live today? Everything you are doing in your life right now is the result of a decision. Are you intentional about how you come to those decisions? Or do you just kind of do whatever feels right in the moment? So the first thing that I would ask myself, if I'm you guys, if we're trying to summarize the point of the reason we're even here tonight, is question number one. Hold on. I'm trying to get myself. Why would it do that? Why would it do that? If I'm selecting, this is stupid. Like, why would it select the guy who's not here? Why would it do that? Look at you. And then I go back. This is dumb. It doesn't make any sense at all. What if I do this? Oh, there we go. I figured it out. StreamYard, you're dumb for what just happened. In any case. So here's the question I would ask you guys. Honest question. Maybe think about this as you go back to this. Question number one. Do you guys have a process that you follow when you decide how you come to conclusions, when you decide how you make decisions? Yes or no? Do you or do you not? Jonah, I was trying to switch this thing up and it just highlighted you for no reason whatsoever. StreamYard's dumb.
Did you think if you had a scientific process, you could have done that better?
Maybe.
Yeah,
but I didn't have a peer-reviewed study to tell me how to figure out.
Maybe if you did, you would have figured it out.
Maybe the man was trying to hold me down. Maybe I was
stupid ass discernment or whatever the hell you mean by that.
Maybe I was about to spit bars, and they were like, "Nah, this guy can't spit these bars anymore. Let's silence him. Let's put him off screen." Look right here, Magic 8 Ball.
Love it.
I would ask this, right? Sharon says she does. Honest guys, ask yourself this question. Do you have a process you follow? Right? And we'll start with a tough one. Politics. Be honest. Screw Donald Trump, screw Kamala Harris, screw RFK, screw all these people, right? Respectfully. Love you guys. For the most part. Yeah, I do. Here's the thing. Forget all of that for 5 seconds. That's not my forget the political agenda. How did you guys come to those conclusions? How do you guys come to these conclusions? Is it because of what your parents believe? Is it because what your friend group believes? Your social circle? If you were raised in a different neighborhood, would you believe something different? Right? Here's the thing. You joke But here's the thing, Jonah, I believe you are almost 100% susceptible to the fact that you believe what you believe because your parents did.
So politics is an interesting one. If you want my answer,
Well, hold on.
politics.
Let me make this point, and then you can say what you want to that because I don't want to forget my point. Here's the point
Okay.
that I would say, guys, for everybody who's listening to this. If we're talking about the importance of coming to your own conclusions of your own volition, like a grown-ass adult with your own brain who knows how to think for yourself, these are the questions you got to ask yourself. Sorry. If you don't have answers to these questions, I would argue you don't think for yourself. You're just responding to your most popular opinion or something emotional. And you can get mad at me if you want to, but the evidence just states that. The peer-reviewed evidence states that, right? How did you come to your conclusion? Why? Because your homies did it? Because you were in the military? Because your friends? Because your parents? If you don't stop and say, hold on, why do I believe what I believe? Why? And if you can't say, okay, I know this is what everybody else thinks, and this is what everybody else wants me to believe, but if I'm willing to let them forget their opinion, if I wasn't going to be judged, and everybody was going to support my opinion, my decision, what conclusion would I come to on my own? And I would argue that the great majority of us don't even know how to do it. You would stop at that question because then you'd be like, well, okay, so what do I think differently? And then the first thing you look up, you're going to go back to believing what you were told to believe, and you're going to go back into your echo chamber just repeating the same stuff to yourself. This is why we had this podcast, guys, because if you genuinely want to ask yourself the question, do I think for myself, or am I just a little copy and paste of everybody around me? Then the first thing you have to do is start challenging your own ideas. This is why my process is questioning things and searching for the opposite of my perspective, exposing myself to information that's not something I would normally, and then not just exposing to myself to it with the intent to reply or to shut it down, but actually with the intent to understand it and say, hold on, is there something to this? Like, hold on, maybe there is something valuable that Kamala Harris has to say. Let me listen to her arguments objectively and see if she actually says something that makes sense logically, right? Let me try that repeatedly. See if you get any luck. And if you have to close your mind and excuse a bunch of things for it to make sense, then you're lying to yourself to develop your point. And this is the process. So I think I would argue, guys, I would really suggest, I'm asking all of you guys, ask yourselves this question, because I would argue the majority of humans on this planet don't know how to do this. Anyways, what were you going to say, John?
Politics is an interesting one, though, too. Like, we can get into whether I'm just, biased, and if I ever think to myself, I think Keanu, I don't think you realize that if I truly just believed what my parents believe, I'd just be a socialist. I don't think you get that, but it's okay.
I don't get that because I don't know your parents.
Yeah, that's the thing is like in the end, like you don't get like a lot of my beliefs differ very greatly from my parents, right? Okay. I just seem like a libtard to you because you're way more on the conservative side, right? Whether you don't like me saying that, you generally have more conservative beliefs. You're not team A or team B. I believe you when you say that. Just generally, your beliefs are more conservative. They just are. But what you believe lands on the conservative side much more than the liberal side, generally,
sure,
depending on it. So, politics is also just an interesting one with truth, at least if we're talking about policy. Now, when we were talking about vibes of just Trump and Kamala, I think we should be doing what you're saying. You also got to realize that values come into play with politics. What do I value more, right?
But values are also influenced by this exact same process.
No, that's my point. That's what I'm getting to, is that values you almost 100% get from your parents. Questioning values is like, I don't know. You should, to an extent, question some of the values that your parents give you, right? But why there's also just a what?
Why only an extent?
No, you should. You should question the values that your parents give you, right? But
I would argue your parents should teach you to do that.
What?
I would argue your parents should teach you to do that. If I'm training my kids, I would explain to them why I believe what I believe, and then I would challenge them to come to those conclusions on their own. Because anything given to you by somebody else is never valued or appreciated. It's testable. It's changeable. It's bendable.
There are certain things that you can just get from your parents, right? Like how to walk generally works well. we can get into a whole argument if the way that we're walking is like just bad for us or something. But there are simple things you should get from your parents. Getting to values, right? What's true is also based on what you value. So in politics, there's never going to be a truth. A lot of times it'll be based on what you value, right? Like, for instance, with the abortion thing for you, tell me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming you believing that life begins at the beginning, at the that
Conception?
life begins at conception, right? And that we should never kill anything as soon as conception happens, is somewhat religiously based. Am I wrong, or am I wrong about that, or no?
No, that belief system comes from a spiritual understanding. Sure, as far as like that life starts at conception. Yeah, that's
So
definitely.
my only point, I guess I'm trying to say, is that realize that politics, we could both look at the same thing, the same facts, and come to completely different conclusions because of our values. So I just want that I'm just adding to your point of like, what we value is also why we disagree in politics. Politics isn't as truthful.
I don't disagree with that at all. If anything, I think that just reinforces the need to be really, really intentional about why you believe what you believe, because it's more nuanced, right? Politics is a fantastic example because it goes into categories like values, like public opinion, like popularity, like acceptance, right? There are a lot of people who will not say who they're voting for out loud because they're scared of being accepted or shunned publicly. Imagine the freaking ridiculous cowardice that goes into that, but the understandable cowardice as well. Imagine you are potentially going to lose your job and not be able to provide for your family. Imagine living in a world where that's the case. This is why it is so easy to not think for yourself, because unfortunately, there's real life ramifications to doing so. But there's also real life ramifications for not. We live in a society where things like cancel culture own the narrative, and cancel cultures tells us what not to think and what not to say. It doesn't encourage us to think or to say. It just encourages to think and say like everybody else. When the common narrative in society tells you to think like everybody else, the common narrative is wrong. Period. When the common narrative does not allow for independent thought, the common narrative is flawed. And I would argue potentially built with malicious intent to subjugate their people. Because no society who wants a thriving people stops them from thinking or being innovative or being creative or expressing themselves. I would argue also that if you are hindering them from being from being creative and expressing their thought and expressing themselves in a free fashion, you're trying to subjugate them. You're trying to control them. And you're using fear and intimidation as your measuring, or as your like, I guess, your tool to do that. That's the world that we live in. That, for me, if I'm using my question everything philosophy, my first thing is, why don't you want me thinking for myself? And then a very quick conclusion says, because you don't want me, there's something you don't want me to know, which means that there's something worth knowing. And if you don't want me to know it because it's worth knowing, what is on the other side of that information? What is that on the other side of that enlightenment? I got to use discernment and deductive reasoning to feel comfortable asking these questions. And most of us don't. And I think that's why we live in a world today where we're fighting over things like pronouns, right? Respectfully. No disrespect to anybody who's going through their own personal things, because here's the reality. There are people who live in a life where they are going through their own personal hell because of things like that. But we are focusing on not on actually helping those people. We're focusing on controlling everybody else. It's a problem.
Keanu, question. Why can't I question the fact that your pronouns are she, her?
What do you mean?
To hide something?
Wait,
are you trying to hide something?
Are you questioning my? Are you?
No. What it sounds like you're saying is that why can't I question whether your pronouns are she, her? And are you hiding something?
You
And
can't
are you
question
hiding
that. No.
something?
You should question that.
Are you hiding
You
something
need to question
based
that.
on that? So I should question whether
100%, bro.
you're
I'm not about to contradict my perspective now.
So wait, so are you saying that I should question whether
Yes,
your pronouns are he or him? Okay.
correct.
Just want to make sure.
Question. Wonder.
I
Ask your
should
friend.
question
it everything, bro.
whether
I
you're
said
a
what I
woman or
said.
not.
You
All
should.
right.
Question it.
Just throwing it
Now,
out there.
doesn't mean that
I'm just throwing it out
Question
there.
bro.
I'm just
Question it.
taking I'm just taking it literally what you just said. But
So let me ask you a question, bro. Honest opinion, because
Okay,
one thing
sure.
that I like about this
I'm
conversation.
fucking around right now, but
No,
like,
of course. Here's the thing. Like, why don't we have a sense of humor anymore? Why can't we joke about stuff like this without people getting all in their feelings? It's sad. It's really, really sad. You should be able to joke about things and still care about the people, right? I'll make a Puerto Rican joke and still love Puerto Ricans. You know what I mean? It's a thing you should be able to do. I don't know why we can't do this anymore. I don't know why comedians are the only ones that can do it. And even them, they can't really do it that much anymore. It's sad. It's a really, really sad world that we're starting to create for ourselves. But here's my question, bro. We've disagreed a lot. But today, you actually seem to agree a lot on my processes. And maybe you don't agree with my conclusions, and that's fine. I don't need you to do that. But you agree with the process and the methodology that I've kind of presented here today. It sounds like,
pretty efficient. I liked it.
Appreciate it. Let me ask you a question. Do you think it's possible? And I'm not asking for any weird commitments. I'm just asking for you to just, I guess, to the best of your ability, be objective. Do you think it's possible that if you did genuinely follow some of the things that I presented today, you think it's possible that maybe you actually start to change how you view some of the things that you believe?
Anything's possible. The thing is that I've heard when it comes to we disagree mainly on politics. I feel like that's our main disagreement. I don't think we disagree that much more other than politics. I think the issue is that politics, I have heard the other side, right? I do hear the other arguments in politics. With broccoli, I didn't know it was bad for your heart or whatever the fuck it was going to say. Just never even entered my atmosphere, right? With politics, I constantly hear the other side. I watch tons of political debates. Like, I don't know if you know that. I actually listen to political debates when I'm just like kind of driving to work and stuff, just because I find it interesting, right? So maybe, but it would be I feel like it would be kind of weird that if I heard something that was different than what I hear in these debates or than I hear from you already. You know what I mean? You already told me the other side.
No, but here's the thing. I told you a perspective that you disagreed with without explaining all the context that led me there. Understanding that changes the conclusion that you have about my side, right? It's easy to dismiss. Like, just give you a simple example. 10 years ago, if I came to you like, yeah, bro, all kinds of celebrities, they just doing all kinds of weird stuff. And you got to do like weird sex things. And then if you want to get into the industry to sign a contract, you got to go get, you got to do weird sex acts after they drug you. And then what they're going to do is they're going to show you the tape afterwards if you don't sign their horrible 360 deal. And that's how they're going to get you into the industry. And a lot of celebrities sign that. And that's why they are the way they are. You would have told me I was crazy. Arguably, a lot of people still would today. Right? Because that sounds crazy, does it not?
Well, it doesn't sound crazy now because of everything that I know and all the fucking news stories.
That's
so I don't know.
Here's the thing. I knew this 10 years ago because I followed my process and exposed myself to information everybody else didn't. This information isn't new, Jonah. There's been interviews with hip hop artists, underground hip hop artists that never made it from 15 years ago talking about this stuff. Cat Williams was talking about it in 2004, bro. The same information that's out there today was out there 20 years ago. 15 years ago, I knew this. 15 years ago, I could have told you this. And you would have told me I was crazy.
Well, I would have been 19. So I would have been like, dude, who the fuck is this guy? Fucking 19.
Correct. You didn't know. Well, it would have been weird going to like a fifth grader and be like, yo, hey, I know you're going to science class.
I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in college.
Oh, you were in sophomore? Okay. All right. That's good. Because it would have been weird if you were like in fifth grade and I'm telling you what Diddy's doing in the bathroom. I would have been the diddler at that point.
That would have been funny.
So here we go, right
Uh,
there. Those are my pronouns. I like it. Jess,
question
that's
everything.
fantastic. Question everything. So here's the thing, bro. Like 15 years ago, if I would have told you this, it would have sounded crazy. Now, not so crazy. What changed? Not
The
me.
evidence.
Not the information that I had. No, the evidence was always
The
there.
evidence. Well, no, there was more
No,
evidence.
evidence. No,
There's
it's
been
not the
more
case.
evidence. There's been
No,
more
it's
evidence
not
since
even
you
that
came
there's
out.
more evidence. It's
I hate
that
that there's more evidence.
it's that they decided to release the evidence. You know, here's what's gonna be the worst part about this. You want to know the worst part?
Tell me.
It just became popular information. That's it. The same information. Now, mathematically, obviously, because time has passed, obviously more information is going to start to get created. More evidence will accumulate, obviously. But there was sufficient enough evidence for us to be where we are today 15 years ago. No question. There was sufficient enough evidence, right?
I don't know anything
was.
about celebrities. This
But
is it,
here's
so
the
I
thing,
don't
bro.
know if that's true or not.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's the craziest part. The only reason everybody's accepting it, because popular opinion's now accepting it.
You don't think it's because there's more evidence? You don't think it's because there's even more evidence than there was before? You don't think that has any role to play?
Let's test that. Tell me 3 pieces of evidence that you can point to.
I'm gonna be honest. I literally know nothing about it. The whole P. Diddy thing, I don't pay attention to. I don't know anything about it whatsoever.
Perfect. You just proved my point. Hold on, no. We're gonna go right there. Here, are you? Let me explain.
Are you saying there is no more evidence? Are you saying it's literally the exact same evidence?
No. By nature of time and math, there is obviously mathematically more evidence. That's not anything I'm refuting.
That's I'm going off what you said.
No. But here's my point. What changed the narrative isn't the existence of more evidence. What changed the narrative is that public opinion started accepting it. And because it became popular, people accepted it as true. And you just proved my point because you've seen none of the evidence, but still are comfortable saying it's true because popular opinion has decided as such or decided so. That's my point, bro. This is how the world we live in works. We don't need facts. We like to pretend we do. But as a general rule, most of us just go along with popular opinion. And if popular opinion says you're canceled, you're canceled. If popular opinion says you're a pedophile, you're a pedophile. If popular opinion says you're racist, you're racist. And the only thing that changes that is people willing to either say irrefutably, there is so much evidence, yep, that's right, or nah, just because everybody says it doesn't make it true. Let me do my homework. And this is why thinking for yourself is so important, because you just agreed that you've seen none of the evidence, but you still believe that Diddy's all the things he says he is. This is my point, bro. Popular opinion drives the world that we live in. It drives what we believe. It drives how we think. It drives the decisions that we make. And we are naive and completely oblivious to the fact that we live our entire life and make decisions based on stuff that we have no control over.
Wait, hold on. So first off, I'm going off what you said, not what you told me there's more evidence because, and then you said it's because time or whatever, right? I fully admit I haven't looked at any of this. I don't care about celebrities that much. They don't affect me that often, to be honest. I was going off of what you said. Generally, I think popular opinion changes partially when there's more evidence for something, and then partially about what you're saying. If there are a bunch of news stories that are put out there, that also changes popular opinion.
Yep.
Now the question is it true? That's true. How do you know which one is true? I would say there's definitely, like with news stories, it gets really complicated, right? What you have to do is just like the best thing that I can do. Either you go through my process, which takes fucking ever. You can do yours, which I like, because generally, if you're looking at both sides of it, then you're going to get the full picture. Probably if you look at the other side and probably look at your side and then come to your own conclusions from that, you're going to get a better picture. Are you okay?
And remove the bias. Did you hear that?
Yeah, what was that?
Explosion in the house. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, that was weird.
I can see it over here.
Okay.
So no,
But,
here's the thing, bro.
yeah. I went off what you were saying, though. That's why I was like, because you said there was more evidence. So I was like, okay, you don't think that it contributes to the popular opinion at all? I'm just saying it. I think it's probably a bit of both. I think
But here's
probably
the
the
thing.
evidence helped change popular opinion.
Or popular opinion was pushed to change the narrative, and because they lacked evidence, they used popular opinion to make up the difference. Both happens. Case in point, Trump being racist. Trump's not racist. He ain't never been racist. There is more evidence to the contrary than there is evidence for popular
let's stick to
opinion.
Diddy. Let's stick
Yeah,
to Diddy
that's
for
what
a
I'm saying.
second.
That's a contrary thing, right? That's the one where popular opinion was used to influence the belief of something with no evidence. But now, popular opinion, people who also have no evidence still believe it to be true, right? But here's the thing: asking your own questions could have given you this information way in advance, right? This is how I knew this 15 years ago, 10 years ago. I told y'all this when I first started dating Yvonne. I was telling her, here's just so you know, here's how I view the world. Here's all this
Just
stuff.
so you know, P. Diddy is diddling children. I want you to know that, Yvonne. His first date. Like,
Did
what
I
is
or
it?
did
What do
I
you
not
even
give
mean
you
that?
information surrounding this 10 years ago?
On the first date?
The industry. 100%. Wasn't the first day. It was like the third day. I go deep, bro. Bars.
Well, anywho,
The
yeah,
diddler.
I mean, I agree that I agree with almost everything that you're saying. I just think also evidence affects it too. I think you're discounting how much I haven't looked into this at all. I could be wrong. You could be 100% right. But I'm willing to bet if I looked into it, there's some specific evidence that's come out recently that has condemned P. Diddy more.
Yeah, I'm not
than
saying that. What I'm
everything else.
saying is that people don't need evidence to believe the narrative, which means that
Okay.
the narrative carries more weight than evidence, which means that if we want to know what to believe, we have to think for ourselves because popular opinion drives more than we realize. And
Okay.
this is where you gave the breakdown. Yes, you think my process is more efficient, but there's the thing, like looking at both sides to get the full picture, I think it is helpful. However, it is not helpful if you're looking at it with biased lenses. If you're looking at it with the intent to just confirm whatever you already believed, you got to look at it neutrally. You got to lay your emotions down. That is the hardest part. This is what I meant when I said it's simple, but it's hard because this part right here, if you guys genuinely want to understand the world that's going on around you, try this. And you're going to learn a couple things about yourself. One, you're going to learn how difficult it is to stop following confirmation bias, to stop proving your own belief systems. You're going to realize how much you just follow your own beliefs, how much you just want to believe your own stuff, how much you just want to protect your own worldview. Try this, guys. Try it objectively and watch how hard it is. Watch how quickly you start going back to what you already believed before you read anything. Watch how easily you try to look at both sides, and the second you see a headline that disagrees with you, you're automatically catch yourself scoffing, writing it off. Nah, that's bullshit. Watch how quickly you do it. And the second you do that, before you even click the link, you know, holy crap, I'm just trying to believe my own stuff. I don't actually want to know truth. If you can get out of the way of that, the world you live in starts to look very, very differently. Now, it's hard because some of us don't like that because that's scary. But the cool thing about that is it actually answers a lot of questions. The world starts to make a lot more sense when you get the bias out of the question. It starts to make a lot more sense. The stuff that like, why would I don't understand why they would. Oh, that's why. And it's been in my face the whole time. The problem was I had this little filter on my eyes, little sunglasses called bias. So I couldn't see it. It was filtering out the truth. Question everything. Take the filters off. Watch how the world starts to learn.
I agree. I don't disagree with anything you've just said. I think it's always good to try to take the bias off. Question for you, Keanu. Can you fully take the bias off, though? Is that even possible? I think you can take it somewhat off, but can you fully take it off?
I don't think that's the goal, right?
Okay.
Because all you're going to do is create new biases, right? Like our brain is wired to do that. You're just going to you're just going to create more biases. I don't think the goal is how do I get rid of my biases? I think the goal is if you actually want to get good at this and actually just understand things and see the world differently, be an independent thinker. If you want to be an independent thinker, let's just call that the goal. If you really want to be an independent thinker, I don't think the goal is to get past having biases. I think the goal is to get good at checking yourself when they start popping up again. Get good at catching them. Get good at catching yourself when you start falling back into the habit again.
Yeah, I agree. I just think it's kind of funny because it's like, I think here's what I think keeps happening in our political conversations. You can tell me if you, I mean, you definitely disagree with this, but it's okay. Here's what I think keeps happening with the conversations. You accuse me of having liberal bias, right?
Mhm.
And I tell you, it's like, I agree with you. I do have somewhat of a liberal bias, right? I try to look at it as objectively as I possibly can, right? But I'm not going to lie to you and say like, no, like I generally believe liberal things. I generally am on this team, not in the sense of like I always vote for Democrats, but in the sense of they generally believe what I believe about the world and how things work and what I think is better for the world policy wise, right? What I think happens in our conversations is a lot of times, because you at least say this, and you can tell me if you're wrong, it sounds like you feel like you have no bias either way, whether you have a Trump bias or a liberal bias. In my opinion, I think you do have somewhat of a Trump bias. Is it super strong? I wouldn't say it's like insanely strong. I've seen people with stronger Trump biases. I've seen people who are like, he's literally Jesus on earth, right? You definitely criticize him. But I think you also have a tendency to like him and be biased towards him because of your previous beliefs with the world government, right? With the whole world government thing and like the research you did there. And because he generally is anti-establishment, I think you have a bias towards him because you already have your beliefs about the world government. So that's generally what I think is happening. Because you accuse me, it's like I just grew up that way. That's why I believe what you think. I think what we have to do, at least with bias, I don't
was
think
that a conclusion or a question?
No, that was a conclusion. That's what I think
Okay.
is happening.
All
There
right.
was no question there. I am right, Keanu. Go fuck yourself. No, I'm just kidding.
Sounds right. Yeah, immediately after the conversation about asking questions, Jonah does the exact opposite and just tells me why his idea is definitely right. Got it. Lesson learned.
So when it comes to our conversation with politics, that's what I think is happening. So what I would say, or what I'm curious about, because now I'm going to get to the question part that I was getting to is,
oh, there is a question. It's cute.
There is a question. There is going to be a question. Don't worry.
Also, Dino Nuggies need their trees. Look, Jess Mayo is dropping actual t-shirts in the chat today. I'm just saying.
I love it. I love it. I would say that, or something I would ask to you, Keanu, is how are you sure? Because you've told me it's like, Jonah, if you're looking at this objectively, you would believe this on a bunch of different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
How are you sure that it isn't your bias clouding your vision instead of, and I'm the one looking at it clearly, or we're both clouded? That's something that I've seen in our conversations that I'm curious, based on what you just said, how you feel about that or what you think about.
You want my answer to that question?
Correct. That's why I asked it.
Okay. Well, you made a conclusion the first time. Here's the thing. The conclusion you came to that should have been a question will provide context for this answer, but that's fine. I will simply give you the answer. The way I know that I'm looking at it objectively and you don't is because I know I've spent 2 decades developing this habit. And I am self-aware enough.
The age card on me, this guy.
No.
That's 2 decades ago, I was 9. You piece of shit.
Well, I'm sorry.
How am I supposed to? Sounds like it's some young abuse shit right there. That's all I'm gonna say.
I'm sorry you had such a difficult time developing as a child. I apologize. Maybe you should have eaten more broccoli. Sorry,
keep going.
No. Here's the thing. I just know the habit, right? Like I've done this long enough. I know to check myself when I'm looking at this from a bias. And if I am, I'm willing to call myself out on it. I have done that. It is a habit that you have to develop. So I can say confidently when one of us is looking through a filter and the other isn't, because I've developed the habit of doing so and you haven't. So by default, you won't look through the objective thing. And I look for you to do it. I actually actively wait, just to be clear, because this is a psychological habit that I've developed in my brain because I've consistently practiced intentionally stopping myself, right? It's just like people who wake up and go to the gym every single day, no matter how sick they are. That is a habit that they have developed over time. That is just what they do. It is now who they are. It is just a fact of their existence. A fact of my existence is I process this stuff in my brain before I do it. It's unconscious at this point for me to process it. Every single time I send you a video, I'm like, there is a couple of ways he's going to respond. I hope he surprises me. Very few of the times have you surprised me. I'm not going to say never because there has been a couple times where you have. But the great majority of the time, you respond exactly like I expect you to respond. Exactly.
Well,
right?
you send
So
crazy videos in there. Like, come on, dude. Some of the TikTok videos are nutty. I'm throwing it out there. Some of them are great. Some of them are too nutty. We're getting to the end of the podcast real quick. But
talk about misreading my whole point. Let me talk to Captain, my captain.
I think I've been right for literally like that's like. Anyways, keep going.
Here's the thing. I'm gonna demonstrate my process right now. I actually can see how we came to that conclusion. Right. I can 100% see that. Right. I was speaking to a very specific context that Jonah gave me. So I was answering the very specific question that he asked. I wasn't generalizing this to every single solitary situation. If I were, that's an appropriate response. Captain, my captain. Captain. Bro, why you got that name? It's a lot. Evidence is not used to overcome bias. It's not. That's just not a factually accurate statement. Because if you listen to the previous part, no, it can be. But evidence is also used to confirm inaccurate bias. Case in point, the medical industry. We've given about 10 examples.
It could be either.
It could be either. That is exactly my point. The presentation of this message, which is a freaking YouTube message, so I'm sure it's lacking context. But if what it sounds like he's saying here is what he's saying, which is, well, as long as you have evidence, it's used to overcome bias. That's just not a factually accurate statement because evidence could be used to prove inaccurate information just as it is to use accurate information. You need more than just evidence, bro. Way more than just evidence. This is where my process of questioning everything, I believe personally, is helpful because take something you have evidence for. And if you saw the beginning, go back to the broccoli thing. Very easily by following that process, you realize, holy shit, the thing I was trying to support has a whole bunch of evidence against it too. There's evidence for both. Maybe I shouldn't just assume that one is a foregone conclusion. I'm not saying the other one is also right. Not at all. Both can be wrong. But you just got to be willing to accept that the one that you came with is on that list.
Sure. No, I agree. I mean, I think we should just do this with a political claim next time. Like, let's just do it with the cats or whatever. I'm down. By the way, Gianmarco has been going crazy. Apparently, shots were heard at the most recent Kamala rally.
Shots? Apparently. Like gunshots?
Gunshots. That's what he's been putting in the private chat.
Or like shooting for the ear.
And with that, we're ending the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. What the fuck was that? What the hell was that, dude? If you guys, luckily for Quijano, he's part black. But if it wasn't for that, was that racist about
close. That wasn't racist, bro. You got a super white right now. That was racist.
That was right. That was racist. What I said was racist. Actually, it's true.
Now, here's the thing. I agree with that, and maybe what we can do next week. I have people sending me a lot of information. So I think it's a fantastic idea to go into the eating the dogs, eating the cats. By the way, I dropped an entire verse on this topic that none of you will ever hear. I'm sorry, but there is a verse out there. It does exist. It was fire. Jonah demonstrated.
I'm going to say this. I do not recommend releasing that.
I will not release it. I will not release it.
I don't think you should do that.
I'm not going to do it.
Keep it in the WhatsApp chat. Keep it encrypted, my guy.
I actually deleted it because you got salty again one day and decided to try to use it as ammunition.
Oh, you didn't need to delete it. I just wasn't feeling good that day.
There was bars. But guys, I think this is going to be a good one. Jess, you might be. I might let you hear it, Jess, because Jess is a G. Now, all jokes aside, guys. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Gianmarco, it needs to be released. Rated on a 1 to 10. Tell the truth, Gianmarco. Tell the truth. As far as like bars go. Jonah, next week, let's do it. They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets. We can do that one next week. We'll process all of the information. Bro, you can't. I hate you, Jamarco. I hate you so much. We were in a coaching call today. Jonah, but this is going to be a complete sidebar before we wrap up. I need everybody's opinion on this, Jonah. Jonah, in your opinion, you can't say 7. He knows this. We discussed this in the coaching call today, Jess. Jonah, honest question, bro. First of all, when I tell people to give a 1 to 10, I say you can't say 7 because everybody just says 7. It's either an 8 or a 6, bro. Make a decision. Stop being a bitch, right? So you can't say 7. But here's the other thing. Bro, tell me the truth, Jonah. If you're sending a message, and you may not read into this, I read into this. I want to know who else reads into this. Somebody sends you a message, you talk about whatever, pick the topic. They thumbs up the message. What does a thumbs up response in a chat mean to you? What do you see when you hear thumbs up? I'm gonna tell you what I see.
You see a middle finger?
Nah, I would rather you send me a middle. Don't thumbs up my shit. Send me a middle finger, bro. Just tell me you're being dismissive and passive aggressive.
Like that, I mean, that's what it could mean. That like that's what you mean. Like it could just be like a hey, fuck you, I don't care that much.
Go fuck yourself. That's right? Exactly what when I see a thumbs up, that's what it is. Jamarco thumbs up everything for no reason whatsoever. But I'm like, bro, why you thumbs up at that? Either give me an eggplant emoji, give me a heart. I think it koala bear.
I'm gonna defend Jamarco here. I think it depends. So, for instance, love you, mom. I really hope you're not watching right now. Cause like she'll just send me the most random shit that I'm like, I love you, mom. I don't care about this. So I give a heart, right? So I give a heart. So that's what I do, where I'm like, I just give a heart, right, to everything. Cause I'm like, I love you. I love that you care about me to send me stuff. And I don't know how to politely say, I just don't care about this thing you just sent me. I just don't care about this new Jewish band you found on Spotify. I literally just don't care. I love you. I just don't give a shit like you give a shit, right? Like, that's the type of shit, right? That's what it is, right? I
need to hear it, bro. Next time she sends you something like that, please forward it in the group chat. I want to know.
No, she doesn't want to get embarrassed. Like that stuff. She's told me that we won't do it. But
okay, fair.
The point is that I'm gonna say in Gianmarco's defense, it could be 2 things. It could be 3 things. One is your opinion. That's just like a fuck you. I don't care at all.
It's probably that.
Which it could be that. I think it depends on what it is. If it's just like a random reel, I think that's what that means. Then there's the obvious. If he's like if you're asking him to do something, it means yes. That's obvious, right? And then I think the third one is I have no response to this. I truly don't, but I also don't want you to think that I'm ignoring you, which is kind of my response to my mom when she sends me stuff, right? Because I'm not going to say fuck you to that person. It's just like, so Gianmarco agrees. It's the third. It's like, I want you to know I'm not ignoring you, but I also have no response to this.
I want you guys to know right now, me and Jonah just switched seats, right? Because Jonah, I'm going to admit this publicly, right? You just gave me a very rational, unemotional, well thought out response and explanation.
You think okay, is that are you saying that I usually give out an emotional,
not well?
Fuck you, dude. All right, go on. Just most backhanded compliment I've ever heard in my entire life. Guys, we just switched seats. Jonah finally was an emotional little bitch for the first time in his entire life on this podcast. Everyone give it up for Jonah. You know, it's basically what you're saying. I hate you.
Evolution is now real. I take back my previous podcast.
Yeah, Keanu. Maybe you should question thumbs up more, huh?
I should. I'm out here all the way in my emotions. If you ask me, do I know what it's like to be like, I guess like maybe like liberal in my beliefs, is when you send me a thumbs up emoji. All reason goes out the window. You just told me fuck you. That's what you did. It's just
I hate you. I love you and I hate you. All right, with that, I think that's a good ending, right? Yeah, I think
let's do it. Next week we talk about our pets getting eaten. Cats, dogs, geese, butterflies. I don't know.
One quick thing too, which is going to prove to your point, which was I found super fascinating, right?
Okay.
When I was driving back from Chicago, when I was getting the Uber driver was going off. I was telling Gianmarco about this, was going off about like, dude, I don't know what the hell is happening in my neighborhood. There are just immigrants being dropped off in buses the entire time. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of becoming prone to believe what Trump believes. I'm like, wow, that's pretty random.
I told you a long time ago, you're not going to spend this much time around me and then not.
Now the question is that was pretty shocking in the sense like, okay, I believe that there are buses of immigrants coming on. Now the question is who's sending them? Because I found some evidence to suggest that it is Republicans who are sending them. And we're going to talk about
Nobody believes you.
next
All right,
week.
that's got to be its own. Maybe that's week after next because you're gonna have to come with that.
No, using your logic.
Question everything.
Question everything.
It could be the Republicans. Bars. That being said, to your point, one, there was like a whole gunfight. Venezuelans got shot up in Chicago because they stepped into the wrong hood. So we got to talk about that. It's going to be a good one. Guys, question everything. That's the biggest takeaway from today. If you enjoyed this podcast, hit a thumbs up. Do like the little thumb thing, right? This is the one example where I will accept the thumbs up. Why? Because it's the only option that YouTube gives you. If you thumbs up it and there was a heart right next to it, go screw yourself. That's how I feel.
Because we need the algorithm, guys. The algorithm we need for ourselves.
But Sydney Daniels said it right here.
Thank you, Sydney.
Cindy, you are amazing. Best podcast ever. I hope everybody comes to watch this thing. I don't know. I feel like this is a good conclusive conversation. It was long, but I feel like we got to a point. Hopefully, I thought it was good. And we're going to use this same principle. Hopefully, if you guys use these principles, it evolves how you view the world. We're going to test it next week on whether or not people are eating other people's kittens.
I'm planning on forgetting all of this by next week.
Captain, my captain. Cap, bro, I'm gonna figure out this name. Bro, I got you. Come back next week. I'm gonna practice it. I'm gonna write it into a verse. Like captain, my cap.
Captain, my captain. It's
captain, my captain. We're gonna get there. Guys, we love you. We appreciate you. Prophet and Paradox. How to tell the truth. See y'all next time. Peace.